So we've got a little bit of heavy lifting going on, but we expect that to happen, and then we can. Which way works best for members? That way round, I think, is probably best. Yeah, thank you. Apologies for officers that have got the back of the bottle. Thank you. Good evening and welcome everyone to our December meeting of Planning Committee B. Before we start the meeting, I've got a few announcements to make. First of all, there is no planned fire alarm test today. If you do hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to Agreed Assembly Point, which is at St John's Churchyard off Druid Street, which is about 100 yards or so down that direction, down Tooley Street. There will be council security staff available to direct you in the unlikely event that occurs. Secondly, public toilets are located off the main reception area, so go straight ahead, turn left, and you'll find the toilets in that direction. There's also a refreshment machine to the right in the waiting area outside this room for you to use. Finally, please do switch off your mobile phone, or at least switch it to silent if you're in the room, so it doesn't disturb proceedings. It's also worth letting you know that the meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So if at any point in today's proceedings you do address the committee, please do not disclose any information that you would not wish to be in the public domain, because everything has been recorded and potentially is in the public domain. So any personal details, please do not share those unless you're happy with the world knowing about them. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or tweet about the public proceedings of the meeting. If you choose to do so, please be considerate to other members in the audience and take care not to disturb the proceedings. If you do take any photographs or do film, please keep your cameras pointed towards this end of the room so that you're not taking pictures of other members of the audience. During the meeting, members of the committee will not access the internet other than it relates to the official business of this meeting. Send or receive emails, text messages or tweets concerning the business of the committee. I'd also like to remind speakers to use the microphone when speaking. We've got a new microphone system, so if you are using it, it's worth sitting a little closer if you're used to being here before, than you might have done before, to ensure that it picks you up. And we need that because it's only the audio from the microphones that we can capture on the live stream. And secondly, if you are speaking, don't put a mobile phone anywhere near the microphone, because it does tend to create interference, which makes everybody's life a little uncomfortable. Have we had any apologies? I think every member of the committee is here, so there's no need for any apologies. We're going to take confirmation of voting members. So first of all, I'm going to ask members to raise their hand and then introduce themselves. So raise your hand if you're a voting member of the committee. Thank you. And then we'll do introductions. First of all, I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm Chair of this committee on the Council for Old Kent Road Ward. I'm going to start with Councillor Hartley.
I'm John Hartley. I'm Councillor for Dulwich Hill Ward.
I'm Councillor Emily Tester. I'm Councillor for North Bermondsey Ward.
Councillor Michael Shitu, Councillor for Old Kent Road Ward.
Councillor Kath Whittam, Rotherhithe Ward and Vice Chair of the meeting.
Good evening, Councillor Cleo Stones. I represent Peckham Ward.
I'm Ketsia Harper and I'm the councillor for Faraday Ward.
Thank you. And then just so that everybody knows who everybody up here is, I'm going to ask officers to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Greg. Sorry, Greg.
I'm Greg Weaver. I'm the Constitutional Clerk for this committee.
Ravinder Johal, Solicitor for London Borough of Southwark.
Colin Wilson, Head of Strategic Development.
And John, Team Leader for Old Kent Road Team.
Matt Harris, Transport Team Leader.
Hi, I'm Michael Takaris. I'm Head of Design, Conservation and Transport.
Ash Patel, Manager of Strategic Applications.
Matt Redman, I'm in Strategic Applications as well.
Thank you. That brings us to item 3 on the agenda: notification of any business which the chair deems urgent. we had an addendum report that's been circulated with late observations on the items we got before us this evening. And we also have a pack showing slides which we'll be running through in the meeting. And please note, we'll be taking item 6.2. That's the Queen's Walk item regarding the old City Hall site first. So we'll be taking that item before item on the agenda. Declarations of interest and dispensations. So does any member wish to declare an interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at this meeting? I'm going to give mine first of all. So in respect of item 6.1, I will be speaking on that item, Councillor. I've agreed prior to this meeting with Councillor Whittam that I will vacate the chair at that point, sit in the audience, and Councillor Whittam will take on the chair at that juncture of the meeting. And is the usual rules, once I've spoken as ward councillor, I will withdraw from the meeting so that I was given deliberate. Any further declarations? Being any indicated? So that takes us on to the minutes of the meeting that we held on the 12th of November. First of all, just to see if members are happy that's a correct record of that meeting. Thank you, everybody. Don't see any dissent rather, so I think we're happy to go ahead. That brings us to the main bulk of this evening's business, which is development management. Next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. So I'd like to remind everyone of, on how we conduct our business. First of all, officers will present the report, outline their recommendations, and answer any questions raised by the committee. Secondly, after that, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. First of all, the spokesperson representing any objectors to an application. By now, you need to identify the single spokesperson. If there is more than one objector that wishes to speak, that time will be divided between you. So if there's anybody wishing to speak an objection to any item, and there's more than one of you, please do work out between you how you best spend those 3 minutes between you. The applicant, next after that we have the applicant or their agent. Thirdly, we have a spokesperson representing any supporters that live within 100 metres of a development site. And fourthly, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Those ward members speaking and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters or applicants should sit as far forward in the room, in the audience area as you can. That's particularly important for applicants because it enables us to have a to and fro conversation later on the proceedings if any that addressed properly meeting. However, it's not an opportunity for those people in the audience or here make any representations to engage in a sort of other participant. So, it doesn't decide about that. Only when you're asked to. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating any information which is already in the report. This meeting is not a hearing where all participants present can then cross-examine each other, as I've just explained. At the end of each representation, the committee may then ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the committee to subjects to which they would welcome further questioning. That's particularly useful if you think 3 minutes isn't going to be quite enough for you. You may well want to flag up issues that you would welcome further questioning on if you feel that the 3 minutes won't give you justice on that, and then gives the committee decide whether they wish to ask further on that. After receiving all the submissions, the committee will then debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council committee meeting which is open to the public, but there shouldn't be any interruptions from the audience. And finally, I'd like to everyone present to know that although this planning committee comprises members of different political parties, none of us are politically whipped in how we make our decisions here tonight. Our decisions are made purely in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on the information contained within the relevant reports, together with consultation responses and any verbal submissions with me today. That we hear today. How we approach these applications set out in the development management report at item 6 on the agenda. And if members are happy to note the report, move on to considering the application. Our committee content to agree that and move on? Thank you. That brings us to item 6.2, which is the City Walk, the Queen's Walk application. I'm going to hand over to, I think it's Matt to.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission to partially demolish, extend and to alter the existing building. It also seeks to remove the existing garage and make changes which include altering the scoop, as well as introducing soft landscaping in the surrounding area. The scheme would introduce commercial on the ground floor of the office building, as well as within the lower ground floor, which would be accessed via the scoop. I'd like to draw members' attention to the addendum. This has clarified items such as the UGF figure being 0.206. There's also reference to a scheme being referred to the Mayor of London when this is a non-referable application. Attention is also drawn to the Environment Agency withdrawing their objection. Paragraph 190 to 195 of the Officer Report reference the imposition of conditions and how suggested condition number 2, which related to the submission of the flood defence strategy, was not imposed. This would have meant the Environment Agency had formally objected to the application. The Environment Agency were, however, seeking guidance at the time the Officer Report was submitted and have since withdrawn their objection. This means that there is no formal objection and the scheme does not need to be referred to the Secretary of State if a decision to grant planning permission were made. 2 conditions have been suggested by the Environment Agency. These suggested conditions have been agreed with the applicant and are referenced in the addendum. A further letter from Pottersfield Management Trust has been received. This references items such as the Section 106 legal agreement, the impact upon MOL, and the bluebells with regards to cycle parking. It also references possible construction impact and being consulted upon with regards to landscaping and CEMP. Cycle parking has been updated, as have conditions. A letter of support has also been received from Living Bankside. This letter did reiterate items such as lack of bins, the impact with regards to toilets and construction work, as well as working with the local community, and they are in support of this application. Right. The site is approximately 1.09 hectares and includes the existing office building and the scoop. It also includes the garage to the south. The building is currently empty and has been empty since the GLA relocated in approximately March 2022. The site is adjacent to Thames. There's approximately a 10.5 metre distance between the building and the Thames. The site is borough open land and there's also metropolitan open land to the east and south of the site. The building is locally listed. It's not within a conservation area. It is, however, close to both Tooley Street and Tower Bridge conservation areas. On the opposite side of the river is the Tower of London, which is a World Heritage Site. Tower Bridge is also to the east, which is a Grade 1 listed building. Slide. The top image shows the northern elevation with diagrid and the scoop to the right-hand side. The bottom image shows the southern elevation from Pottersfield Park. The top images show the site from Queen's Walk and with the Christmas market. Bottom image show the existing garage that's to be removed, as well as the scoop. It is noted that the current access ramp from the scoop is not compliant with Part M of building regulations. Next slide. The supporting information has stated that the building was initially recognised as an exemplar of sustainability and high-tech design, but many of these features were not able to withstand the test of time. There are issues with the facade system, which is difficult to clean. The images show the impact that this can have. Also issues with the floor plate and support pillars impacting on the usable space. It currently has an EPC rating of D, but this would need to be improved to a B, so the direction of travel policy is to improve the sustainability of the building. Slide. The use of the main part of the building would remain as offices. The scheme would, however, increase the size of this. It would also introduce a commercial space on the ground floor and within the lower ground floor, which would be accessed via the scoop. There'd be an increase in the number of jobs on site of 145. Slide. Neighbour letters were sent out and site notices were also erected and full comments have been received. 2 neutral and 2 objecting. The neutral comments reference the impacts upon the public right of way, whereas the objections raise the issues of bins, insufficient public toilets, and there should be continued easy access. Next slide. This slide shows the changes that would occur. The angle of the north of the front elevation would alter, and there'd be an increase in footprint to the south of the rear elevation. This is evident in the elevation and the floor plan, with the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. Slide. This slide shows the proposed development, the front elevation on the left-hand side and the rear elevation and details on the diagram on the right. The scheme would lead to an increase in depth from approximately 41.9 to approximately 56.1 metres. This is an increase of 14.2 metres. There would also be an increase in height from 49.8 to 50.4 metres. This is an increase on 0.6 metres. This change would not materially impact upon any of the protected views. The majority of the building would remain as offices, but there would be an introduction, as I said earlier, of commercial units on the ground floor and the lower ground floor. There would be a 16.95% uplift in BNG. The UGF would be 0.206. This is under the 0.3 requirement, but there would be a 104% uplift in planting on the site. There is an increase in cycle parking spaces of 163, and there would be the same number of public toilets. Next slide. This slide shows the proposed changes to the scoop as well as the detailing on the building. It shows areas of soft landscaping and seating that would be introduced, as well as the lift and temporary screen. The screen would be installed and removed when an event is taking place. Slide. This shows the existing and proposed views from Tower Bridge, the existing on the top and the proposed on the bottom. Next slide. The proposed changes would impact on the view of the southern tower of Tower Bridge from the Rill, but this is a kinetic view. It changes as you do walk down the Rill. The impact is therefore considered to be a low level or minor harm to the significance of Tower Bridge. The images on the right are from Pottersfield of the rear elevation. Next slide. This slide shows the possible layouts of the floor office space. So it ranges from an open plan to a cellular layout. It just shows how the different building could be used. Slide. The existing floor plan is on the left and the proposed plan on the right. The scheme would remove the void and would introduce a number of commercial units on the ground floor. These are highlighted in a peachy colour just around the edges on the slide. This shows the lower ground floor. The proposed commercial space is, well, the offices are in blue, and these are the existing circulation space shown in light grey. Would be converted into a commercial space. This is highlighted in the next slide. The proposed commercial space is highlighted in peach. The number 5 shows where the new toilets would be located and accessed through the scoop. There would be other changes, internal changes for plant area, which would be decreased in size, and there would be an increase in cycle parking. Next slide. The site is within borough open land, and the proposed extension and changes would impact upon this. The garage would, however, be removed, which would be an improvement. There would be a 104% uplift in planting on the site. The extension to the office block is not considered to be disproportionate. The improvement to the soft landscaping would be of benefit. Given the siting, the scheme would not harmfully impact upon metropolitan open land. And as shown in the image on the left, there would be cycle parking on Weavers Lane and also adjacent the landscape barrier with Pottersfield Park. The cycle parking has been amended, so spaces here and here, 11 and 4, have since been moved up to here. They would not harmfully impact upon any trees or planting, such as the bluebells. This kind of shows the screening in the bottom right, the 1.5 metre hedge that would be erected along this boundary. Next slide. This is a well-renowned building, and the proposed changes in design would retain a number of well-recognised elements. An example being the curvature of the north elevation with reference to a digrid. Proposed changes would introduce a modern interpretation with large areas of greening, both on the building as well as within the surrounding area. These alterations would be visible from a rill, and the view of Tower Bridge would be affected. This, however, is a kinetic view which changes when walking down the rill. This means that visibility of the south tower also changes depending on where the viewer stands. The impact is therefore deemed to be a low level and won't harm to the significance of Tower Bridge. As I said, there would be a 104% increase in soft landscaping. It would create 145 jobs and would bring back an empty building back into use. The scheme would also be an improvement to usability and appearance of the scoop and surrounding area and create step-free access as well.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for that report. Any questions? I'm going to start with one, which is partly because I used to at one point sit for both Southwark and Lambeth on the Thames Flood and Coastal Committee, and we obviously had the new conditions set forward by the Environmental Agency. We all know that whatever we do, the sea level is rising, and therefore flooding is risk and will be a risk area over future decades. So just to understand a little bit more about the condition, how that works, because whilst as we discussed at the briefing, if there is a flood, it can go around this site, and so this flood the site on its own won't stop a flood. But that is also true with other sites. If nothing is done here, then we'll through this site. If there is flooding, if there isn't enough on there to mitigate against that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the two conditions that the Environment Agency have recommended are on paragraphs 24 and 25 of the Addendum Act, pages 12 and 13. So they are, the first condition is for a condition survey, so that is effectively for the landowner St Martin's to survey the condition of the existing flood defence and undertake any remedial work. And the second is for monitoring condition, and then equally undertake any maintenance work that might be. The third condition that the agency asked for was for a flood defence raising strategy. Now, Officer didn't recommend that as detailed in the report, principally because of two reasons. First of all, it's a refurbishment, so it's not a new building as such. So it is. It doesn't require the same level of conditioning, but also because the sites where development will take place does not include areas of flooded. We are in discussion with the colleagues in the Environment Agency about strategic approach to flood defence in Southwark, and also made contact with colleagues in the City of London. So we can update committee those discussions.
Very helpful, thank you. Councillor Situ.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to confirm then, it seems what you're saying in summary is that it's relatively planning compliant, and the minor issue relates to kind of the impact on the view of Tower Bridge, and obviously that there are conditions which would address the issue of floods or anything. Is that correct?
Yes, as I say, the UGF score is slightly under, but as I say, there is quite a significant increase in soft landscaping on the site.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you. So I note in the report there is quite a significant increase in both office spaces and retail commercial space, which is good. And I know there's kind of the extra toilets and extra bin provision as agreed with Living Bankside, etc. Just wondering kind of what impact this will have on Pottersfield Park, because that's quite a small park, and this scheme does suggest there'll be quite an increase of footfall, and whether within the planning documentation or proposal and agreements with the developer, whether there's anything been agreed to mitigate or help kind of manage that kind of increased footfall, not increased footfall, over the next kind of. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. So the Pottersfield Management Trust did ask for some contribution. We had a look at that, and our view was that it didn't meet the test in terms of being relevant to the development itself. The reason being, so there will be 145 additional jobs because of the increase in office floor space. There'll also be more activity because of the retail and the food and beverage offer on the lower ground floor near the scoop. That's mitigated pretty much within the development itself. So I think that slide there shows quite nicely that at the moment where there is no seating, there's a generous amount of seating that's proposed in the triangular shaped area with planting, replicating effectively the type of seating that there is in this field. So naturally, I would think, office workers would probably use this, so that would perhaps ease the impacts on Fields Park, but also the food and beverage area, which is shown in the scoop, top of the image there. Again, that's almost self-contained, so it would be, the seating would be improved, the accessibility would be improved, the toilets would be there. So our view is that that additional activity would largely be contained within the site itself.
Can I add, Chair? Sorry. Also, the removal of the garage is a building that sort of stands now between the existing building and the park, and that would sort of open up. Yes, the building is being enlarged towards the south, but the removal of the garage means that the park can sort of open up more towards the building. So there's a sort of a little bit of give and a little bit of take, if you like, in respect of all part of the building that extends towards the park, but a sort of large building, a sort of medium-sized building, the garage, which is removed by this proposal, sort of opens up the back of the park and restores that back to park as well. So there's a bit of sort of give and take this. Mentioned.
That's helpful, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Tester.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about affordable workspace, because I know obviously this scheme isn't providing any affordable workspace, and I just remembering an application that was before in my own ward of Clove Building. I know that they had an uplift of office space and they were providing the 10%. So I was wondering if you could sort of just talk through why this application isn't.
It's, as I say, the policy is only applicable if the increase is above 500 metres squared. So the proposed development would be under this limit of 452. So it wouldn't need to provide.
Interesting figure. Any further questions or comments? Sorry, questions. Councillor Tester.
Sorry, another one for me. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit to the servicing arrangements for the retail uses, because obviously they would probably produce a little bit more in terms of kind of vehicle movements than the original office space would, and I don't think that's really covered in the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. So the whole Moor London estate is serviced by serviced underground. So there's a basement with comprehensive servicing there. So the site will be serviced from there. So there's no additional servicing above ground required. I'm sure the applicant can perhaps talk a bit more about the detail of that.
Yes, and I'm aware that there's been a lot of work being done in that area to sort of improve sustainable transport as well. Any further questions? No? Oh, Councillor Hartley.
I'm just conscious that in the introduction it was mentioned that this is locally listed, and of course is a very well-known building across London and much wider. Do we not have any professional opinion on the changes to the shape and size of the building? I don't mean in terms of the drawer. I appreciate the compensations with the garage being removed. I mean in terms of the change in shape and size.
Thank you, Chair. The advice, the professional advice, is in your report in the section on design and heritage. So please refer to that. I can't, paragraph numbers. Give me. Starts on paragraph 82. So if you want to refer to that, then that covers the local listing. The local listing was mainly associated with the high profile of the architect, the Norman Foster, and and obviously its connection to the mayor's office and the mayor's and the public, the public facing aspect of the building. Obviously, that is being fundamentally altered by this proposal. Although a consideration is the fact that its essential form is retained, is preserved by this proposal, and its height is not significantly increased. So and its impact on the views of Tower Bridge it has been minimised. So that is in your pack on page 32 on the images. So it was considered fully in the detailed assessment of the design and heritage.
Thank you, Councillor Harper.
Sorry, going back to my previous point, I guess I'm just not convinced that 2 extra toilets in the landscaping you kind of highlighted will make that much difference to what's currently there in terms of like public realm space where people could sit and stuff. And I guess it's not just the increased number of office workers. There will be an increased footfall into like commercial retail units. I guess it would be helpful to know if there's kind of a calculation on to like kind of footfall in the area, like roughly how many people we're expecting to see increase per day kind of passing through. I'm not sure if that's something you have information about or like how that calculation's been made. Thanks.
We do, and I'm just pulling it up. But so the increase is in the order of hundreds of movements, so 200 to 300 movements per day by 2030 in and around Pottersfield. But that includes the increase from population changes as well. So that's all included. We don't have the figure specifically from what's been proposed. I don't know if the applicant might be able to answer that in a bit more.
But you're saying it's about an extra 200. Do we know what the current figure is? Is that again?
And at the moment, just to the south of 110 Queen's Walk, there are just under 1,400 movements per day, and by 2030 that would increase to between 1,500 and 1,700. But as I mentioned, that includes any change to the population profile between now and 2030.
So it is an increase of a significant factor difference.
Any further questions from members of the committee? In that case, do we have any objectors present that wish to speak on application? Don't see any. Do we have the applicants here? Would you like to come forward? Thank you. Thank you. What I'm going to ask you to do is very briefly say who you are and where you're from. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes to present. I will give you a sort of 30-second warning when we get close to the end of that time. So you can just sort of wrap up your comments at that point. And then we'll obviously committee. So over to you. Press the button.
Thank you. To introduce myself, my name is Charlie Prentice. I'm the Senior Asset Manager responsible for 110 the Queen's Walk, as well as I'm also the Asset Manager responsible for the larger St Martin's Estate, commonly known as London Bridge City.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. And on behalf of St Martin's, I am very grateful for your time this evening to discuss this project, which we are incredibly excited about. St Martin's is a real estate company. We were incorporated over 100 years ago. We purchased the land known as London Bridge City over 50 years ago, and we want to still be here in 50 years' time. Our initial strategy when the previous occupier broke their lease and gave us the building back 3 years ago was to seek a new occupier for the building as quickly as possible. However, a thorough review demonstrated it sadly required more significant updates to actually become relettable. The tricky facade gave a poor outlook to what really should be stunning views. The inefficient floor plates and poor EPC performance meant significant internal and external alterations were necessary to create a sustainable building for the future. Its limited ground floor interaction made it appear austere and unwelcoming. So in summary, the building was unfortunately compromised and not suitable for an inclusive modern workplace. But at the same time, we recognise this is a great building with several distinctive features that we didn't want to lose as part of the retrofit project. This includes its circular form, its curved silhouette, and most importantly, the scoop. So following a design competition, we appointed Gensler to give the building a new lease of life, reinforcing its important role as a prominent modern workplace in the heart of our estate. We also appointed the leading landscape architect, LDA Design, to develop proposals for the extensive surrounding public realm. They were asked to provide a dynamic, biodiverse, and multifunctional place for all residents, workers, families, and visitors to the area. Sustainability, accessibility, reuse, and adaptability are the cornerstones of our proposals. We want to retain the structure of the building while transforming it into a workplace of the highest operational sustainability and inclusivity. Now, your planning officers have been instrumental in shaping the proposals throughout an extensive pre-app process, and we'd like to thank our ward councillors and the wider community for engaging so openly from the outset. We held a successful public engagement programme which helped shape the scheme. Changes post-submission have included more public loos and rubbish bins, an updated construction methodology keeping the walking routes open between Shad Thames and London Bridge, and a refined interface with Pottersfield Park.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Test.
I was going to ask if you had anything else to add to your speech.
No, literally, my last bit saying that we're confident that we'll provide a lovely mixed-use space that will keep people coming back to London Bridge City. So, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Councillor City.
Thank you. Not much of a planning consideration, but have you had thoughts about how you can interact with local people, but local community groups, and then additional kind of opportunities created, jobs created, either with a partner who will be there or with yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So, may I invite my lead architect and planning consultant?
Yes, of course. Yes, yeah. Like to come forward. If you need to, yes, that's fine. Yes. So yes, if you could both introduce yourselves, if you could press the button on that. So.
Good evening. I'm Valeria Segovia, architect from Ghent.
And I'm Alistair Buckle, planning consultant from DP9.
Okay, yes. So, Councillor, do you want to repeat your question so that they can?
Yes, no, it's to say thank you for the presentation. We're just wondering whether you've had any thoughts about whether you would look to work more with community groups. We've heard the Living Bankside and support of applications. I know they do quite a lot of work in supporting young people, getting young people into employment and other things. I don't know whether you're intending to work more with community groups, both in terms of engaging them in terms of opportunities created from the site, or whether there's any other ways.
Yes, so just for us, community engagement is very important. We have a team which supports St Martin's at London Bridge City, which is there to spend a lot of time engaging with the local communities. And for instance, even last night, a community choir sang on the estate, and we invite, that happens quite a bit with that community engagement. On a more working level, we're very proud of the fact that we do offer a number of apprenticeships, both for our engineers and our reception staff within our buildings. So we do take pride in our community, and we're there to work with Southwark.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, I think, next. And then...
Thank you. So the kind of maybe more abstract, given that St Martin's owned this land when City Hall was built, and City Hall obviously purpose-built to authority, and as I understand, basically have been unable to stay there. How confident are you as the applicant that the changes you're making long term be affordable residents moving in, and like what kind of have we done to future of a similar situation everywhere? That makes sense of the question.
Sorry, firstly, forgive me, St Martin's didn't build City Hall.
No, but did they not own the land at the time?
We own most of the land, but at the time we didn't own
apologies.
the City Hall space. But yeah, we have been an owner at London Bridge City for the last 50 years. I also don't necessarily think they left it because they couldn't afford it. I think it was about the reason, but that might be your own. I wasn't as close to it as that. So, but I think St Martin's has a 3 million square foot estate here. We build it to cater for the office environment around us, and we'd really hope that what we do as City Hall is there to cater and create an amazing office for Southwark and for London, really. I think the last thing we want is to keep on having an empty building like we've got at the moment. So we'll do everything in our power to make sure that, we may well hopefully bring a great occupier into Southwark.
Thank you. Councillor Whitton.
Just looking at the consultation, must have been thrilled to have for comments. The only things complained about were bins and toilets. That was all. A development house. Can you tell us a bit more about the face-to-face interactions? All the visits to the website, talking to people.
So yeah, we hosted, was it 2 consultations?
Yeah, two. Yeah, so from the outset, we met with key neighbours. So, for example, Chatham's Residents Association, Team London Bridge, etc. At the very outset of proposals during the gap process. We then went on to hold a series of public petitions, and those were within Hayes Galleria. You used an empty retail unit, so we actually had quite a lot of passing traffic. I think we even had BBC London News turn up to do a short segment on it. So I think we generated quite a lot of interest in those face-to-face consultation events. And then we've obviously continued meeting with those key stakeholder groups since.
Any further questions? Councillor Tester.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I kind of wanted to build on Councillor Harper's question about the sort of future users, particularly of the kind of food and beverage side. Have you got tenants kind of lined up, ready to go? I'm just sort of thinking a sort of twofold question with partly in Tower Bridge Court, which I believe the other side of Tower Bridge, there's going to be a competing food and beverage facility on the ground floor there. And, you know, is it, do you sort of see that both are kind of viable together? And then also as a sort of secondary point, there has been certainly in the past an awful lot of kind of antisocial behaviour, particularly late at night on Pottersfield Park and that sort of area. And are you, you know, what sort of food and beverage uses are you thinking for that area?
Thank you for the question. So yeah, it's going to be quite intriguing to see how that retail food and beverage evolves over the next couple of years. And when I talk at length to my retail agents, they say to me, Charlie, look, 3 years ago we would have chosen a very different F&B operator and community offering in that space. And then, as you quite rightly say, there's now been a food hall has popped up just, you know, 400 meters away or something. So we have to be quite fleet of foot to react. But one thing's for sure is we operate a number of retail units around there, and we try our best to not step on each other's shoes. And I guess a bit of an example is if you look across the way, you've got Tavolino, you've got Five Guys, and then you've got Gaucho. So you've got a bit of a mix of operators, and then further down you've got the Riverside bookshop. You've got you've got your Pretz. You've got a whole mixture, and so we'll take a lot of time choosing the right retailer because we know it has a big impact. And we know it's such a great destination for both the office workers as well as visitors, tourists, etc., etc. So we're going to take a long time and we take our care choosing what we do there.
Councillor Hartley.
I'd like to come back to this question of the redesign of particularly the size and shape of the building. As the report highlights, it is a very iconic building as we currently speak, but as was highlighted in the officer's reply to my earlier question, we're dealing with a building that is essentially the same height, but will have a larger footprint. Given that there seems to be so few other objections, that the design impact of this iconic building seems to be the biggest question before us at the moment. Could you just take us through the process of how you've gone about it? I don't wish to be mean about it, but if you are expanding a building out, not raising it up, much like those of us that have experienced similar processes personally, we're talking about the process of middle-aged spread with this building.
And actually, I'm going to use this model because this explains it really nicely. So this is currently the facade being inclined, the structure as well being inclined. The main purpose of the facade simplification and the simplification of the overall design, which ties in a little bit to the question before about how are we going to future-proof building in terms of maintenance, has been, wait a minute. We straighten the facade. The facade needs a little roof for the void. And that's basically simplifying the facade. It's easy to clean because it's straight. This walkway on the outside is to be able to clean it, which allows us to get rid of the garage and empty the floor because we won't need all the equipment that is in the garage. So by default, the building needs to be inflated a little bit by straightening the facades and creating that simplification. We have on the south, there was and it was in some of the drawings that were presented, there's a big pinch point from the core that we're trying very hard to maintain. We don't want to touch the superstructure and the edge of the facade. It will come up in a minute. And what we're trying to do is create activation in a 360 all around the building. The whole ground floor and the school will have activation by enabling to have space. So we needed to detach the facade of the south from the core, creating space, which enables to have more retail units on the south. And on the north, it's literally just by straightening the facade, that curve to the north needs to be changed a little bit. But what we're trying to do is to embrace what is distinctive from the building, which is the circle. The floor plates are a circle, and what changes is the facade articulation.
Any further questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to return to the public seating area, but as I said, do please stay near the front in case we have any further questions. I'm then going to ask if there are any supporters of the application that live within 100 metres of the site that wish to speak. Any indication? And I am not seeing any ward councillors unless I've missed. No. That brings us to any further questions the committee has coming after that for office. Right. In that case, let's hear some of your views about the application and where you think things are heading. And like I said, Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, I think it's been a shame that the building's been left empty for so long. It needs to be done, make it more accessible, part of the community happening in that space.
Any other views anybody wishes to give? Councillor Tester?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Councillor Whittam. It's such a shame that it's been empty for so long. I have to say it's not necessarily, I think, the most exciting scheme being proposed, but that's certainly not a material planning consideration, and I can't see any reason to refuse it. I really do hope that the sort of retail offering is good and kind of complements what is being offered elsewhere, and yeah, looking forward to actually seeing this being brought back into use again. So I think I would support it on balance.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my overriding feeling is, and this isn't the applicant's fault at all, but the fact that we had what was a very iconic building built for something very specific, and the changes, I mean, I take what you're saying, it is going to make really good office space, which I think will be really useful, but like I do think it's a shame that we've got this situation where the building which was built for something so specific and so key to London is no longer being used for that. But that is not a planning consideration for today's meeting. I know that. But I am slightly concerned about the impact on Potter's Field, and particularly since the Potters Field Trust have raised that. And I do wonder if there's anything we can do about that in terms of make sure there's like a bit more support, because I do think the footfall is going to increase quite significantly, and I do recognise that there has been landscaping and things placed into the site, but I don't feel like it, and this is just a gut feeling, it would be sufficient. But I did also just want to say I'm quite impressed with how much work went into community consultation on this. That's really good.
And have you any specifics about how you think it might improve?
No, because I'm not very good at that. Whether or not there's any management or S106.
We'll ask officers to scratch their heads, I think. Councillor Hartley, I'm going to take then Councillor City.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a little concerned that we're losing something that's a very iconic part of the Southwark skyline. Is things are going to look a little different as you approach that bit of Southwark. I think a good case has been made through this process that can bring this site back into use. All of the positive points that were made by council, that's what I agree with. That outweighs the changes that we perhaps in an ideal world would.
Thank you, Councillor Situ.
Likewise, my views are that there doesn't seem to be any substantial planning consideration reason around this itself. I do agree as well for those who have said that I don't necessarily think that the space will be used for kind of affordable workspace itself, but that's not material. It's not necessary in this situation. So
Thank you. And just in terms of my own observations, I mean, I do share some of Councillor Hartley's concerns. I think this building will look a little less attractive without that sort of sheen, smooth appearance from the outside. But it's one of those times you need to sort of balance the form of the building outside and the form of the building inside, I think. Having been inside the City Hall a few times, I know there were some people who liked it and some people who didn't in terms of working in it. The one time I did get, and it was a previous mayor rather than the current mayor, but get to go in the opposite, even rather than make me think that the mayor had been stuck in the attic of the building, which seemed a bit strange. Most important citizen of our metropolis. So I think there clearly were some issues about the design of the building. I can understand how that doesn't translate well to a commercial let. And as I think as people have said, this will enable that building to, or that site to be brought back into use and to add to the economy of the local area, which is a good thing. Officers, I did set you the task of thinking about, is there anything we can do to help put Councillor Harper's concerns, or at least try to address some of those in terms of, is there anything we can do around the conditions, do you think, about Potters Fields?
Just for, first of all, for additional explanation. So earlier on today, the applicant Fields sent us a letter which referred to the addendum. The applicant responded, and Potters Fields Management Trust replied to that, saying they were satisfied with the response from the applicant. It was too late for us to include the addendum. Matt did touch upon it before, but they were satisfied with it. But also just draw your attention to paragraph 17 of the addendum report. So the applicant has sat down and discussed what happens when the garage is removed with Potters Fields Management Trust. It's just there. So it's the image on the bottom right. So a number of meetings with them. The work has been a result of that discussion, and what the trust asked for, the applicant estimates is going to cost them between 50 and 75,000. So there is also there's already a financial commitment from the trust. We have also within the addendum included within paragraph 21 and 22 some changes to the conditions that the trust wanted. So 21 was about encroachments or potential impacts on the park from tables and chairs outside the retail facilities around the City Hall. And also they've asked for consultation on CEMP about the self-construction. So I think they're generally satisfied with this.
Just while we look at the addendum report, the Bankside comments about bins feels like something that best easing out a lot of.
Yes, we don't have a condition for bins, but it's something that members can, of course, impose the applicants. It could be incorporated into the landscaping condition, so you could amend that condition to include additional bin storage areas.
Seeing the applicants seem to be nodding, you seem to be happy to have that conversation. Okay, so I don't think we need to amend the recommendation. We can take that under the conditions or assurance given. Okay. Given all of that, I would like to move that we accept the recommendations that are set out in the report. Firstly, the planning commission is granted subject to the applicant entering into an appropriate legal agreement. I don't think we need to refer this to the Mayor or Secretary of State any longer, do we? So we can strike those two elements of paragraph 1 out. Paragraph 2, in the event of the requirement of paragraph 1 not being met by the 28th of February, that's not a very long time. Usually we have slightly longer than that. Is there a reason that it's a short time? Given Christmas and everything? Yeah, that seems sensible because it does seem quite short. So I'm going to say till the 30th of April 2025, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate for reasons set out in paragraph 4.7. And thirdly, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised under delegated authority to make any minor modifications to proposed conditions and Section 106 obligations arising out of the detailed negotiations with the applicant and the Mayor of London, which may necessitate further modification and may include the variation, addition or deletion conditions as drafted, although I guess again we don't need. So apologies for the slight amendments I was making on the hoof there, but hopefully that's clear what we're voting on in terms of recommendation. Does any member wish to second that? So Councillor Whitton, thank you. So we're going to ask each member in turn how they wish to vote on this item. Councillor Whitton.
For, Chair.
Councillor Harper.
For.
Councillor Hartley.
For.
Councillor Soanes.
For, Chair.
Councillor City. For. Councillor Tester.
For, Chair.
Councillor Richard Livingstone, and I'm voting for that as well. The committee want a 5-minute break. We'll take a 5-minute break and also give a chance to sort of clear the table and people to move around a bit. So thank you very much. That application is granted. We'll reconvene in about 5 minutes for item 6.1.
Item 6.1, 257 to 283 London Southwark SE15, yes, pages 8 to 207, the agenda pack. And we invite the officer to present his report.
Councillor. So this application seeks full planning permission for demolition of existing buildings and mixed-use redevelopment of the site, comprising purpose-built student housing, including auxiliary cafe and cycle workshop, a new self-storage facility, and light industrial workplace, as you can see from this image. So just give you a context of where the site location is. So it's within the Old Kent Road opportunity area on the eastern edge. First, see from this image where my cursor is. So the site itself is 0.34 hectare, and as you can see from the bottom right area photo, the area is predominantly a residential, commercial, and industrial. There are a number of large residential estates nearby, containing terrace houses and apartments, so including Tustin Estate, where you can see where my cursor is on the top image. And then further north is the Bramcourt Estate. So immediately to the east of the site is the railway embankment, which marks the borough boundary. And further to the east are some residential housing estate within Lewisham. As you can see from this image, the existing site contained a single-story warehouse where my cursor is. To the north of the site, where you can see from image number 2, is bound by Shower Street, and the further north is the Hilderton Neathen scheme, which is now known as the Bermondsey Heights, with the planning committee gave planning permission for 28-story mixed-use redevelopment. Just in terms of policy destination, so the site itself within the site allocation NSP 70, as you can see from this image, it's the main really policy kind of site constraint is flood zone 3, but it benefits from flood defense. The site does not include any listed building structure or in any sort of conservation area. The site is immediately next to the east of the site is the South Bermondsey Railway embankment site of for nature conservation, but it's within Lewisham. So the beta rating is 2 at the moment, but it's predicted to rise to beta rating 4 once the transport improvement is needed. And as I mentioned before, the site itself is within the site allocation in the draft Old Kent Road Area Action Plan, OKR 16. So the aspiration is to deliver mixed-use development, including both new homes and industrial uses. Before talking about the proposal, maybe it's worth mentioning how that scheme come about. But the applicant initially proposed a scheme consisting of a self-storage only at pre-app stage back in 2022, and then during the course of the pre-application, upon the request from the officers, so applicants revised the scheme to meet the aspiration of mixed-use redevelopment, so including some apartments, light industrial floor space, as well as some conventional housing. However, the applicants later concluded that the initial mixed-use scheme with residential elements is no longer viable due to the economic climate and also the building regulation in relation to fire safety in particular. And that's the point where they switched the conventional housing to PBSA, the student home. So as you can see from this image on the top, the current proposal, the PBSA element contain two core A and B. They both front Ilderton Road. They are it will have a shoulder block height of 10-story, and then it will have the tower element, which is 30-story, where my cursor is. The servicing yard for the PBSA element is south, where my cursor is. The self-storage and the affordable workspace element are either light industrial will front Shara Street, where my cursor is. In addition, within the PBSA, just to clarify, in terms of the servicing for the commercial element, there will be an undercross car parking where my cursor is. That purely serves the affordable workspace element and the self-storage. So in addition, within the PBSA element, there will be a cafe, so which will be publicly accessible for the community to where my cursor is. And there will also be a cycle workshop where the community can use, and it is a operator will be using the space to do some kind of repair services for the community. So since that one of the key issues raised during the engagement with different stakeholders is around the PBSA element, and this map is trying to show the PBSA that have been completed or in the pipeline between 2020 and 2024. With the purple circles, they are the schemes that have been built. So there are 3 schemes, the Old Kent Road area, and then the orange one is the one that is being built at the moment, near Burgess Park, the Gango Road one. There are 2 schemes which have been consented recently. They are shown as green on the maps. The one for the Devonshire Place and also Daisy Business Park scheme. And it's worth mentioning is it might be that the Daisy Business Park scheme might not come forward, given that the developer now has gone into a relationship. So in total, and then the application site itself is indicated as the number 7 in pink. So in total, when we look at all these schemes in total, number of student room will be 3,600 coming with the Old Kent Road area. Bear in mind that I mentioned some of the schemes that have been considered might not actually come forward though. And this, yeah. Oh yes, sorry. So around all these schemes, so there will be 54 affordable homes, including that has been built, and there's 223 that have been consented alongside all these PBSA elements for these 6 schemes as shown here. So in total, there will be 277 affordable homes that will be in the pipeline together with these PBSA elements. And in terms of the new payments, those that have been built will trigger 5.2 million for off-site affordable housing delivery. There's 1 million for the scheme that is currently under construction. And then the consent scheme, that's 2 schemes I mentioned earlier, they will provide 20.2 million in the payment in lieu. This live scheme that we are talking about, the subject site, will trigger 20.7 million. This scheme doesn't have any on-site affordable housing, that will be direct let and will trigger 20 payment in lieu for affordable housing delivery elsewhere in the borough. And just to give a sense of where this map shows the schemes that have been completed only, so these 4 schemes, and 1 scheme that is under construction, that just show how close they are to the subject site. So the closest one is the 313 Ilderton Road, which is about 300 meters. And then the other 3 schemes, they are ranging between 500 90 meters to, more than 1 kilometers. And in terms of the immediate context, so that is what I've just mentioned is for the Old Kent Road opportunity area. So this is just zoom in to see where OKR 16, which is this subject site is situated within. As we can see from this table, I guess what the worth mentioning is 1,306 homes will be in the pipeline for phase 1 within the OKR 16, and that comprised of 937 conventional homes and 250 student beds, 886 co-living schemes, and that will be converted to conventional home using 3 units equal to 1 conventional home. That will take us to 1,316 homes will become forward in phase 1 within OKR 16, that particular site allocation. Measuring against the aspiration is to have 2,200 homes. That we are like halfway through the site allocation capacity. And of all these conventional homes in the pipeline, now 60, approximately 37.8% will be affordable homes. So that is just give members the context of where the site is situated within. So these PBSA elements will provide 592 student beds, which would contribute to an equivalent of 237 homes, which will help meet the council housing target, which is 1,305 homes per annum. And as I mentioned before, it will deliver, will provide 20.7% affordable housing payment in lieu, which is equivalent to 35% of the habitable room. And viability assessment has been assessed by the independent assessor commissioned by the council, has confirmed that that amount is the maximum viable amount, subject to early and late stage review, which will be secured by a Section 106 agreement. And then from officers' perspective, looking at the data that we have got, the overall proportion of the conventional home in OKR 16 and Sub-Area 4 and the OKR opportunity area will still be broadly maintained, considering the existing and the emerging context. And the applicant has also included, as I mentioned earlier, a publicly accessible cafe, which is around 100 square meters, a cycle workshop around 100 square meters, and some free exhibition space for around 200 hours per year for community use as a kind of to promote sort of a community integration. So from officers' perspective, the lack of affordable housing provision, conventional affordable housing provision currently would make it less likely to contribute to a mixed and inclusive neighborhood. But nevertheless, considering all the other factors, including payment in lieu, the direct contribution of student home, and some measure to integrate the existing community, which is considered on balance, that element is acceptable. In terms of the commercial element, there will be an uplift of 6,852 square meters from the existing, because I think it's only one single-story warehouse, and the scheme will deliver the self-storage and also the light industrial space. And for the light industrial floor space will be affordable workspace, 1,030 square meter, which is about the minimum policy requirement. And as we understand, the applicant has engaged with at least 3 potential charities who might occupy the space, and they have given them some advice on how they would like the space to be. And that might be something that the members can ask the applicant further about their engagement with the potential operators. And just lastly, in terms of land use, So in the Oaken Road area, there is a housing phasing plan to ensure the public transport capacity matches the development capacity. So with the first 9,500 homes to deliver in phase one in advance of signing of the construction contract for Baker Line extension. The second phase will be delivered after the contract was signed. But at the moment, in the pipeline is about the 9,500 cap, which means this scheme will be considered as a phase two scheme, and the applicant is free to a granting condition restrict the implementation of the residential element until the Baker Line extension contract is signed, which will be secured by a settlement agreement. This image just try to show the massing height and the tall building consideration. I mean, the key is that the site where it is circled in red is allocated as a tier 1 building, so the site it is appropriate for tall building. And as you can see from the right hand side, the image from taller element will match the height with the permanency height scheme on the left hand side. And the shoulder height block will be 10 meters, which also again matched with the Stephen scheme, i.e. the permanency height scheme. And so the scheme itself, it will deviate from a 10-story height to a taller element, 30-story, near the railway embankment. So obviously consider the developments would play a role in delivering a beneficial contribution to the local townscape. This image from the top is just to show how the scheme would deliver in terms of public realm. There will be 40 new trees on the Ilderton Road. This image, which is view from the junction of Charlotte Street and Ilderton Road. So there will be the cafe at the corner, which kind of attracts people and make sure that it's legible and people can see it clearly. And where my cursor is the light industrial floor stage, which will have their own individual entrances. And then there will be the entrance for the self-storage. And they all got their own signage and make it legible for people to use. This image tries to show what the quality of the materials. So they're mainly brick building, but there are some other design features to make the facade more interesting, including, like we said, windows, canopies, etc. And the materials we take reference to the nearby permanency height scheme and also the chapel nearby, which is a local building. This image tries to show where the communal facilities they were dotted around the different floors. The scheme itself obviously will provide good quality of living accommodation for students in terms of both the size of the bedroom and the internal facility. This table will show on average every PBSA bed space will have 1.29 square meters of internal facilities, which is slightly below other schemes that we've seen. But the reason being is that the scheme will deliver a roof terrace together with an internal communal area, which will be double height, which means it would be really like high qualities in terms of ventilation, in terms of daylight, sunlight. So if we take that 2-story into 1-story, that will make it the PBSA bed space back to 1.44 square meter, which is kind of more or less the same as other schemes that we have seen in the borough. And this image tries to show what the greening that the scheme will bring forward. As mentioned before, there will be 14 new trees on Ilderton Road, and it will achieve a urban greening practice of 0.4, not just through the tree, but also green roof and some green wall along the boundary where the eastern bit next to the thing. The scheme also would deliver 0.53 biodiversity net units, which means a 350% net gain in terms of percentage above the baseline. The PBSA element will connect to district heat network and also use air source heat pump for cooling and backup heating. The scheme will also target BREEAM excellence. Maybe it's worth drawing members' attention to the addendum report. So there was a objection from Councillor Richard Livingston on Sunday, also last Wednesday, but the key issue are mainly around the lack of on-site affordable housing and poor consultation. The responses have been provided in the addendum report, and I believe Councillor Livingston may speak on the details of the objection as well. And apart from that, we received 2 objections from members of the public on Sunday, raising the issue around overloaded infrastructure capacity, inadequate affordable housing, negative impact on community, and inadequate consultation events. Again, the issue have been addressed in the addendum report and the committee report itself as well. And it's worth mentioning during the official public consultations, we undertook 2 rounds of consultations, and we received the 2 letters of support. And the 2 letters of support mainly around the provision of funding for affordable housing, provision of new public spaces with passive surveillance, supporting local economy, and provision of new skills and employment opportunities. And in the addendum report, there's some comment from TfL. Again, that has been addressed in the report already. There are some minor typos, and just also to clarify, is the development on the setting of the grade 2 listed guest holder. So in the report, it's considered that the proposed scheme will have a lower end of the less than substantial impact harm to the setting of the grade 2 listed debt holder, but we have clarified that it will not have such an impact because the new development near Lewisham, the new permanency scheme will kind of obscure the view anyway. So in that case, unless that scheme is not coming forward, there will not be any harm to the setting of the grade 2 listed debt holder site. Just to summarize what's the benefit of the scheme, so the scheme will contribute to the borough's housing target by provision of student home and 20.7 million affordable housing payment in lieu. As I mentioned, although there's no on-site affordable conventional housing, which would be the council's priorities, but nevertheless, it also limits the contribution to the creation of the mixed use and inclusive community in this neighborhood. But on balance, it's considered acceptable. There will be some commercial floor space, publicly accessible cafe, cycle workshop, free exhibition space for up to for 200 hours for local community to use, 1,030 square meters affordable workspace, which is beyond the 10% minimum requirement, which is around 232 square meters above the requirement. It will enhance and activate the frontages with enhanced benefit to the public realm. There will be a package of transport mitigation and improvement works, including a new raised table and pedestrian crossing on Ilderton Road, and some financial contributions, including for the bus service enhancement and the bus stop enhancement on Ilderton Road There are 2 bus stops nearby, and there's some further financial contribution to local public realm improvement. And as I mentioned before, it would deliver some green infrastructure, achieving urban greening factor 2.4. That's a net gain of 350% improvement to urban drainage, and they will have a 3M target, excellent, and 39% carbon saving beyond IL. And the scheme will also create new jobs, 63 new jobs, 63 short courses, and 16 apprenticeship for the unemployed. So the residents during the construction phase, and potentially 25 full-time end-use jobs once it's been completed. So on balance, officers considering that the scheme is recommended for approval subject to conditions section 106 and GLA referral. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, a couple of questions. So firstly, my biggest concern about this is the lack of affordable housing. I note in the report, both in the recommendation on page 5, there's a reference to payment in lieu, and then again on page 41 in the as the maximum level of affordable housing lease, again reference to payment in lieu. It talks about priority for conventional affordable housing rather than and that payment in lieu kind of that. But the Southwark plan refers to 35% housing scheme, but then additional to that, another 27% affordable student housing. And this doesn't kind of factor both of those things. It refers to 35%, but not the 27%. So I think that's kind of an omission. I am just generally concerned that there is nowhere near enough affordable housing, even like the payment in lieu of that. It's something Councillor Livingston brought up in his objections, given that this is a building, the exemplary. I think there's a real risk that there's that precedent for what exemplary count as going forward. I just want to your clarification on that. I will leave my second question later. I'd like to talk about.
Who's chairing this? Get on affordable. Who's got a question on affordable? One then, Michael.
Oh, sorry, I probably switched it off. On the affordable housing question itself, obviously, it's planning consideration that we have a mixed community, and it's within the AAP itself. And it would be really useful to hear some thoughts about what you think are the significant needs within the borough at the moment in terms of kind of the affordable housing or student housing from your perspective. It would be really understand what is the greatest need so that we can take that into account.
Councillor Tester, yours was on affordable housing as well?
Yes, it was. It was regarding as to whether the scheme is direct let or not. With regards to the London Plan Policy H15, as to whether that actually applies in this instance, because I believe that there are different criteria for the level of affordable housing that should be provided on site versus off site, as to whether this policy applies or not.
Councillor Hartley.
Just for some clarity on that, we've heard a lot about the 20.7 million. There's some clarity on how the review processes would deal with that, given that the large part of that payment 5-10 years down the line, that we're talking about equivalent value rather than those specific figures.
I'd like for you to get your teeth into that.
Colin. So in terms of the question about direct let, yes, it is a direct let scheme. And in terms of review mechanism, so if as in the draft test of term, so there is review both early stage and late stage review. So for early stage review, so if the residential component is not has not reached the substantial implementation within 2 years, then we will trigger a new viability assessment, which again the council will commission an independent viability assessor to look at the financial FVA, and then at that point to decide whether there will be an additional kind of what is the maximum amount of payment in lieu can be achieved by the scheme if that early stage review is triggered. In terms of the policy and the greatest need, maybe that will, yeah, the payment is also index link as well. That is part of the agreement in the draft 106. So even if there's increase in inflation, the council is not necessarily losing out because through that mechanism that will be captured. Yeah, this.
Yes, so in terms of Council City's question about greatest needs, and also the question about our policy on the 27% affordable student. In terms of greatest need, I mean clearly there is a great need for affordable, which is emphasised in the Southwark Plan, and which probably all members are aware of, from their surgeries. But in terms of student housing, there is also an evidence-based need in 2022 Southwark Plan for approximately 10,000 additional student bed spaces borough. With this scheme and other schemes which are in planning at the moment, we'd be at about 7,000 student bed spaces. So we still haven't met that assessed need. The other important consideration there is that of the 23,000 graduate courses in Southwark, there are estimated to be about 20,000 students who are looking for education, who are attending those courses, and 7,000 of those, this is our own evidence base, are estimated to live in conventional housing. So one of the cases that the GLA made through London Plan also makes is that the provision of student housing offers the opportunity to take students out of conventional housing where they're renting conventional housing because they have no other alternative. So moving towards our own plan target of providing 10,000 student homes, we think, would also help meet a general need for housing. Not specifically about affordable housing, they're kind of moving out of housing which isn't necessarily affordable by definition or by legal requirements. The payment in lieu is quite significant. It would be index linked and it would be subject to review given this is a phase 2 scheme. And that payment would go to our housing revenue accounts, where quite challenging for the council to deliver affordable housing at the moment. So that, with other payments, would make, we think, a significant difference to the council's ability to carry on with its own council housing building programme. And Pan pointed out that the cumulative contributions just in this area are somewhere around £50 million in total of all the schemes were implemented. In terms of the affordable student requirement, Councillor is absolutely right. Our own plan policy says 35% on site priority, and then an in-lieu payment of 5%. That's not possible. In addition to 27% of student housing on site. What we have done in this application and what we've done in other applications, which comes as is that we prioritised the in lieu payments ahead of the on-site provision of affordable student housing. One of the things we tested with the applicants is that point. Could have had affordable student housing on site, but that would have reduced the payment from 20 million to a lesser figure. And so given the priority to affordable housing provision, the Help Housing Revenue Account, we prioritised that larger payment in lieu figure rather than the on-site affordable student housing. That is something our own independent assessor confirmed to us. This is the most. They think that can deliver, and there has been quite a long conversation with the developer about that figure, which is a really significant sum. The points, I think the point about direct lets around the London Plan policy. London Plan policy does say, if you have a direct let scheme, it can be direct let. Mix of other and nominations. Nominations can be, and the rest can be direct let. But our plan is that if it's direct let, if it's nominations, it has to be 100% nominations from a university or whichever university it is. So we have a kind of higher bar for a scheme if it were to be nominations, which is why the committee tends to see more direct let schemes, either 100% direct let or 100% nominations. In this case, it's 100% direct let. That's the basis on which the viability is. And as I say, as officers, what we're recommending is that it would be better for the council larger in lieu pay, smaller in lieu pay than site affordable student. And sorry, we missed that question. But yes, the take the point that Councillor Livingston makes about the design. But what we've done is we've just tested the design in its own merits. Yes, I mean it could be designed like this with affordable housing in it, but the design in its own merits we think is a good design. And I think by criticising the design because it doesn't have affordable housing in it is not a position that could be sustained effectively. Because the design is about the external appearance of the building rather than what's happening within the building. What's happening in the building does come into that exemplary conversation because we do talk about quality and internal design quality for residential, including student. But as Pam pointed out, we think the design quality of the student is actually good in this instance. So we feel that in that sense, it meets our tall building policies, both in the AAP, which do identify this as a location for tall building, and in the Southwark Plan, which does talk about exemplary design. And again, there's been a lot of discussion with the applicants about those design qualities of the tall building over the last year and a half. So we do think that the design is exemplary. But yes, it doesn't include conventional housing. Purpose-built student accommodation.
Can I just ask about the fire regs for purpose-built student accommodation? Is that why we don't have to have 2 staircases in the tall element?
Thank you for your question. There will be 2 staircases, and in fact there are 3 for some part of it, maybe.
Not 2 in each.
Yeah, because
in each tall building.
Maybe bring up.
I thought it was 1 staircase in each.
So this is the floor plan. Yeah, I'm sorry because I didn't include all the floor plan in the pack, so it's in the slide now. This is the kind of the backup slide, so I didn't print it up because I included all the floor plans into the slide just for reference, maybe easier to show where's the location of different amenity space, etc. So this will help show where the staircase is. So we can see on the top there, maybe a bit hard, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. So this is the first one. You can see there's a stair here. There is another one here. And there's another one here. And just to confirm, HSE has been consulted and they have confirmed that there's no objection to the scheme.
Councillor Soames, you have a question.
I think I had a series, but a couple of them I think Colin has sort of included or certainly partially answered. Obviously, what initially seems a fairly straightforward scheme, you know, and change of provision is actually quite complex. I'm particularly interested, but obviously around the affordability, which members right along on this side have raised. PBSA, how do you calculate the, because obviously we've got conventional homes and we have targets around that. I'm interested for you to expand and tell us a little bit more about how do you equate the 592 student beds to the equivalence of 237 rounded homes? What does that phrase mean, and how do you what do you base that on? What is the criteria for those calculations? What is the format in which you use to arrive at those figures? And then my second question would be to go back to the design, because there's lots of elements to the structure, to the proposal. We've got industrial, retail, and obviously the student accommodation. And I'd be interested to see where the entrances are and are they fully secure in terms, and I'm thinking in terms of the privacy and protection of the students. So I'd like you to talk us through that, but go back to this formulae.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So in terms of the conversion, the GLA has got a standard. So we normally take 2.5 as the standard, i.e. any 2.5 space is equivalent to one conventional home. So that is how GLA calculate their housing needs and targets. That is the figures that we always use. That conversion rate 2.45 is how we come up with the figures of 237 conventional home. So in terms of the floor plan, I think that image might be helpful. Again, sorry, it's not in the pack. Again, it's because it's got so many images. So this drawing as shown is the ground floor plan.
Yeah, because
So-
I couldn't actually understand
Yeah, so
it in full from what we've received. So yeah, if you could talk me through where there's different separate entrances.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
how.
So so where my cursor is the PBSA main entrance. So where that would be the sort of the reception area. Students can use that space, and then that where my cursor is the top end of the building. So that is the cafe that we talked about before. So that is where the public is able to enjoy if they want to.
And is that completely separated from the main student entrance area, or is that sort of fluid? There seems to be a door that between the student space and
So that space here is just mainly for emergency access, that sort of thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not like directly linked, if that makes sense.
All right.
Yeah, so that is
Okay.
within the PBSA element. In
Yeah.
terms of the commercial element, so is where my cursor is. So that will be the individual entrance for that affordable workspace one, and then individual entrance for affordable workspace 2, 3, and then that will be, because in the first floor there will be, so this is this drawing, the mezzanine floor. So for that 3 units, they will have also got the additional floor space for them individually for 3. So as you can see from my cursor, 1, 2, 3 is 3. And then on the upper floor, first floor, there will be a communal sort of affordable workspace for the bigger one, which, you know, the operator can subdivide it if they want to a smaller space, depends on their need. Further up, that is the 3rd floor. It will have the similar arrangement. So that is under access to these upper floor, upper workspace.
I suppose my main point, Pan, is that the student element is completely protected.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I mean, I think that's
because there would be like a kind of, you can see from this wall, the kind of basically two buildings, but they're attached to each other. The commercial element is to the top part of the image, and then that is the bit for the PBSA element.
And the potential retail tenants would not have access to private accommodation and would not be able to.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, okay. And then in the 106, there will also be a management and maintenance plan that will be secure to make sure that the access and stuff will be acceptable, so that can be dealt with under the Section 106 agreement.
Right. So Colin, you mentioned in your previous responses about, you know, future projections for student accommodation and 23,000 courses, 20,000 students, etc. But Pan in his presentation mentioned that there are 2 schemes that potentially won't necessarily go forward or endangered. Could you say a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, and just on your point about safety and security, so paragraphs 265, 266, 267 of the report also talk about management, student housing, and that's management and social behaviour, security, and on-site. But so there is something, and I'm sure that, you know, the applicant could probably say a bit more about that if you ask about that. In terms of schemes which look like they are unlikely to come forward, 19 to 35 Sylvan Grove, so that's also called Daisy Business Park. So it's opposite an estate we purchased on Sylvan Grove about 5 years ago to rehouse residents from the Ledbury estate. So so that scheme has a consent for a mix of some on-site affordable housing and student housing, and it had an in lieu payment of £21 million. But the applicant has been unable to secure funding to take that forward. And then following that particular applicant went into administration. So we don't think that site is now going to come forward. Student scheme. The consent on that site is likely to expire on the 16th of January. So in all likelihood, the administrator will then probably try and put that site back into the marketplace. And I would expect in the new year we'll probably start getting calls about what kind of schemes might come on that site.
And this wasn't my question, but just in finally, in response to Councillor Harper's question about, you know, you sort of, well, on balance, have to take a sort of a judgment on lieu and payment and whether that is something more favourable than otherwise. It would have been actually interesting to see those 2 figures. So you mentioned a lieu and payment of 21 million, which is what? But then you said that would have been a lesser figure. And it would have been interesting to actually see what those margins were for us for you to sort of, whether we would then agree that the correct judgment has been made to accept the lieu and payment rather.
Can I just raise one other thing that wasn't mentioned at all, and that's the daylight sunlight and the fact that 227, 255 Ilford Road, 103 windows have water production in day. That wasn't mentioned in your in your.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's right. So for the main impact will be on the Needham scheme, which is opposite of the site, the Bermondsey High scheme. The main impact really is the existing windows. They're kind of restricted by the design of it anyway already, because they've got some sort of a window with a recess from the main elevation, and also the Needham scheme, they've got its 10-story building and then the podium within it, and then there's some further building to the north. So the windows that are affected kind of restricted by their own building within the development. So from that perspective, so as you can see from paragraph 244, so 48 of them are in this kind of categories where they've got very low existing VSC because of their own design. And then out of those remaining affected windows, the absolute level that they can achieve in terms of VSC is still about 15%, which is not it's not unusual in a quite dense location in the London. And in the draft AP, there is the aspiration to have dual building in this area. And as you can see from the design of it, the taller element has already shifted as far as possible from those windows, and there will be as much spacing between those the two taller elements as possible. And the shoulder height block is exactly the same height as the Needham scheme. In that case, it kind of mirror the massing of the Bermondsey High scheme. And from that perspective, it is on balance considered the impact in terms of amenity space would not be detrimental to the level that would warrant a reasonable refusal.
Councillor, it's also worth saying that the homes affected are all dual aspects. So the issue that Pan's referring to is deck access. In order to get dual aspects, it's basically a deck access. So and predominantly they are windows to front doors. So the sort of kitchen area.
Thank you. Going back to you were saying there's a need in Southwark, I think 10,000. That right, student. Doing a little bit of quick maths, and obviously I understand where universities are don't match the kind of layout, but 23 wards in Southwark, that would be about 400 student places in each ward. Do we therefore think it's appropriate that planned 3,000 be just in one area of the organization, given that student housing should be kind of integrated well into the community? It feels like there's a lot in this particular area, and I wonder whether that kind of meets that kind of requirement of having well integrated communities, particularly given the kind of transient nature of like student. On that point, it did say in the report there was a strategy for integrating the students and the kind of user workspace. You know which bit I'm referring to, don't you? Yeah. So just that strategy wasn't included. I was wondering to speak more to that. Got some points about community, but I'll come back to that later. Finally, just wanted to check how many of the student rooms are kind of easily adaptable for wheelchairs, and there's no qualities impact assessment submitted. Are we kind of comfortable with that from a officer point of view? Thank you.
Shall I take the question about the wheelchair accessible provision? So there will be 30 accessible studios, so which meets the policy requirement for 5%, and there will also be disabled parking, so 1 space for students and then 2 space for the commercial units. So from that perspective, I think it cover off the inclusive design element. There's some other, element in terms of the level changes and the size of the lift, etc. So, but that can be dealt with under the details of the design. In terms of the student home, maybe Colin will have some further to add. But I think when we look at the context of this scheme, it's quite close to some of the higher education institute in the area, including like South Bank University. In Lewisham side, they've got Goldsmith, which is quite close. So students tend to want to be closer to the university. So it naturally, so people won't want to live in Dulwich, for example, because it's quite far from where they go to university. So that might be the reason why we see the market seem to show Old Kent Road area is quite suitable for student home. And as we mentioned before, we acknowledge there are some scheme in the pipeline that will deliver PBSA element. So I don't know if Colin got further things to add on that.
Yes. So certainly part of the consideration for student accommodation is proximity to town centres and also within what's called central activity zone and opportunity areas. So this scheme is within an opportunity area, the Old Kent Road opportunity area, and it's close to the Old Kent Road town centre, albeit not in the designated town centre. But it's also close to the shops and also the Bermondsey Station to the north. And obviously, it's got good accessibility back into central London on the buses, both running on Wilson Road and also along Old Kent Road. And as Pan says, the nature of student accommodations, obviously, providers want to put it somewhere where it's relatively accessible to where the universities are, which are primarily in the Elephant and Castle. So that tends to drive the location. We, though, need to be cognizant of London Plan policy in respect of mixed and inclusive neighbourhoods. So one of the things that we are monitoring, and hence the report about where these things are, is at what point do we reach a position where this is no longer about mixed and inclusive neighbourhoods, because it's just all becoming student housing, and balance that with that need to provide those 10,000 bed spaces. Again, one of the reasons Pan did both where they are and how far they are each other, and what other schemes are coming forward in this area. I mean, we have been fortunate in this part of the Old Kent Road and Ilson Road to have delivered quite a lot of housing recently, and quite a few of those schemes are 100% affordable housing, and they're also all include mixed commercial uses. So we feel, and this is why it's an on-balance recommendation, that we're still the right side of that balance, but that is our judgment on that.
Quality.
Yeah, as in the officer's report, there is a section about equality impact assessment. So while we haven't received it directly from the applicant, but officer assess it and considering the impact, it's considered acceptable, particularly around the provision of the wheelchair accessible student unit, disabled parking, etc. So yeah, that is helpful.
I mean, like, it should be in the report. We should be able to see it. I take your point, but we should be able to see that in the report. And it says in the report, whilst the qualities impact assessment has not been submitted, the council given due regard to the above needs and rights for a relevant person. That's a red flag for me as submitting on 50.
Understood. Thank you, Councillor.
And it's not just about physical.
Yeah, and as mentioned in the paragraph 570, So there will be also, employment training opportunity to ensure local people can get job opportunity. So that will help a wider community benefit from the scheme. And there will be improved and more accessible public realm. Again, as including a wider footway. That is one of the key changes that we ask the applicant to change, and those wider footway will be adopt a highway. So that will improve the public realm for those who have a disability to use the space. In terms of public safety, again, there will be a condition for passive surveillance, ICCTV, or lighting, etc., to make sure that the public realm will be inclusive for all different stakeholders to use, either women, girls, or different ethnicities. So that will help create a safer space for people to use. In terms of religious group, we don't think there will be any sort of particular impacts on them, although there is a church nearby, but that seems to be quite far away from the site, and the scheme itself doesn't necessarily have an impact on them. As I mentioned before, is the transport bit, is the wheelchair disabled parking provision is acceptable consider. So overall, that therefore is considered the positive impact assessment, even though it hasn't been submitted, but the scheme itself will deliver the benefit that will tick off the boxes.
Yeah.
And it's perhaps something you can follow up with the applicants as well.
Michael.
Thank you. Just coming back to the issue of kind of affordable homes and viability itself. I think Colin mentioned earlier on about the fact that we should only accept payment in lieu where it's not possible to have the affordable home on site. I understand it's the kind of the aim of kind of our policy at the moment. It's very clear also in the report that one of the nearby sites is Bermondsey Heights, and they had got about 28 story building on theirs. It will be really interesting to hear from you as to how it could be viable next door, not viable kind of here, given the space of only about 2 years or so. It would also be useful to hear, because you've mentioned that actually for external people to look at the viability itself, and they come back to say this amount is the most we can. Presumably, they've also looked at whether there could be affordable provided on site, and if they did they take into account? And I'm not advocating height increase, but presumably viability is determined by what you want to put on site itself. So that, for example, if the height had been increased, they could have put homes there, which would have been more affordable homes itself, so that it would have been a conscious position of the applicant to decide what it presents, what is viable or not. Is that correct? I might be getting it wrong, but please let me know if I.
Yes, in terms of the Barratt scheme next door, that started on site probably about just under 2 years ago, and it was granted consent about a year prior to that. So that was probably about three and a half years ago. So the planning negotiation for that happened about 4 years ago. In the meantime, we had the Liz Truss government. We had inflation out of control, interest rates rising. That was one impact. Another impact is a regulatory impact around two-stair cores, and quite rightly, fireproofing buildings, which also had quite a considerable impact. We've had the introduction of the building safety levy for developers. We've had shortages of skilled labour to build things. Financing, as I mentioned in the scheme, student scheme, which has gone into administration, is really challenging. in the last 2 quarters this year, there's been the record lowest delivery of affordable housing in London. So the GLA figures are that 136 affordable homes have been completed in a city of 9 million people, which is quite shocking. So the economic climate has changed out of all recognition for the developer. And in fairness to the developer, early on in this process, as Pam said, they had a scheme which included housing and affordable housing. But as the economy fell apart, the viability of that scheme fell apart. We have had them tested by our own viability assessors, and they share the view that yes, in this instance, affordable housing in the current climate on site just doesn't stack up. And unfortunately, it's a problem across London. It's a problem for this borough because a lot of our affordable housing is delivered through private development through the Section 106 system. So I would say timing, as in everything in life, is absolutely critical. And Barratt's agreed their contract probably in 2021, 2022. So they had an affordable contract to build their scheme out. They have their own contract arm, so they're in a different boat as well. A bit like Berkeley Homes, they build their own schemes. Nonetheless, they still have to make it work. So we scrutinise absolutely the viability issues, but I it's an extraordinarily difficult time to build housing at the moment and to deliver affordable housing. And of course, the council's direct experience of that and its own struggles to build its own council housing. I think another point worth mentioning, it's been in the news quite a lot of late, is the housing targets, mandatory housing targets. There have always been mandatory housing targets in London plan. And student housing counts to London's and Southwark's housing delivery targets. We expect the new National Planning Framework to emerge probably Tuesday of next week. And we expect our housing targets to increase because we haven't been meeting our housing delivery targets for the last 3 years. This committee has granted more planning permissions than our housing delivery target requires. So there is no slacking off in this committee granting planning permissions. It's just that they haven't been delivered by developers. We can't make developers deliver permissions, and if the economy isn't working, then those things are unlikely to come forward. So it's a factor of timing in the economy, which has made things very difficult, I would say, for the developer.
We'll take John Hartley and then I'm going to move on and then you can come back later. We'll take John before.
Just a couple of points of clarity, Chair. One of the gains that's listed is the cycle workshop, which it says will deliver through Section 106. What sort of minimum requirements, what kind of minimum offer are we expecting to implement through that Section 106 agreement? If you don't mind, while you're looking, I'll ask you my second question as well, which is unrelated. In terms of the internal communal facilities for students, as I understand it, it was coming up a bit short, but you're prepared to accept that the quality of the Sky Lounge means that it should count twice. I think that's what I took from your introduction, the paperwork. That's right. So on that basis, the internal communal facilities actually sort of meet local standards or the requirements of similar projects in granted so far.
But there's no fixed standard, both in the GLA or in our own policy guidance. What we try to benchmark is from other schemes that have come through in the system, and so to see, especially those kind of exemplar scheme that we think is the good scheme, and benchmark that against those schemes. So yeah, that's the correct understanding of the report. Yeah.
But it's not that there's actually a million to be hit there.
Yeah.
Comparison with us.
Yeah, that's right. And in terms of the cycle workshop, so there will be the what is fixed is the amount of the floor space, which is around 100 square meters. So in the Section 106 agreement, so it isn't the idea is that the applicant will find an operator to run the space and then to provide repair services to the public, the members public. And that is will be subject to Section 106 agreement. But I guess in terms of the actual operation, maybe it's a question for the developer team to understand how it will operate in detail.
Councillor Chesterton, if you want.
Thank you. I have a sort of slightly 2-point question. I think slightly challenging is what you said earlier, Colin, about it being of exemplary standard. So kind of looking at our sort of policy around tall buildings, there are sort of 2 elements that have kind of reached out to me that I don't think necessarily this scheme is meeting. I think particularly on the kind of exemplary residential quality, obviously that does to some extent talk about the internals of the building and less about the kind of affordability element of it, but about the communal areas that Councillor Hartley just touched on. I believe that a lot of those are at the lower floors. And I do wonder if we could kind of consider this as being exemplary quality when actually people on the higher floors will be having to travel quite far to use a lot of those facilities. They might, you know, in some instances be travelling 20 stories or so to be able to use those facilities. And that to me doesn't scream exemplary quality across the entire building. I think the second part as well is obviously this is a tall building. I personally have no issue with a tall building at this site. However, I do question the level to which it's kind of matching what we're expecting for the Old Kent Road area, which is tall buildings at stations or at crossings. And this to me seems like it's neither. It's not actually particularly near any stations. It's not really an area of landmark significance. And whilst, yes, it does meet the heights of the other buildings in the area, those ones are much nearer stations or areas of significance. And it seems to me that they are just trying to meet the sort of threshold met by other buildings rather than actually being in a suitable location for a building that is quite that height. So I just wonder if you would be able to sort of speak to those 2 points particularly.
Yes, in terms of the stations and crossings strategy in the AP, it does identify Ilston Road as a location, as Pan showed in the section in the presentation for a series of taller buildings, but effectively with gaps against them, placed against the railway, facing effectively onto the New Bermondsey scheme. And in terms of access to public transport, certainly one of the reasons that we think that there's quite a lot of development in the Ilston Road area is proximity to Bermondsey Station. So Bermondsey Station, sorry, which is just up the road. One of the aspirations of the plan, something we discussed with all councillors, is to improve access and the whole setting of that station. Generally, you're right, the strategy is around the crossings and the stations. But in the AP, we've always been pretty specific about having tall buildings on that edge of the master plan. We've also always been very cognizant of the New Bermondsey development in Lewisham, which is of a very considerable scale. It's much bigger than the Bermondsey Heights buildings and this building. So if anything, here we're kind of stepping up in that direction. Another reason for having the tall buildings there was we've got the railway between ourselves and either the New Bermondsey developments. There are some estates on the other side of the railway line, but they're far enough away to not really be hugely impacted by tall buildings here. And it helps us to meet that 20,000 homes target, of which at least 7,000 we hope would be affordable. In terms of the point about exemplar, I mean, we have assessed where, you know, the layout of the student and where the community facilities are. Certainly the Sky Garden, both student and co-living spaces tend to have those spaces on the top of the buildings because you get fantastic views. And been to some of the toppings out, some of Council Livingston, Council been to toppings out, and you know, these are terrific. So as an amenity, somebody living there. I visited recently the roof terrace at 313 Ilston Rose. We were being shown around by the developer of that student scheme, and there were students who were on the terrace having a bottle of lager and, you know, sort of outdoor picnic, but you know, enjoying that view. So you can see the attraction of that kind of space. I mean, the developer and team, the architect, can probably say more about how to spread out within the building. But as Pam laid out in the slide, which here is behind me, I think there is a good mix of amenity space within this. And there aren't set standards. We just compared it to some committee have approved recently in terms of per square metre space. And Matt?
Yeah, just to add on the accessibility point, there are some areas of the Alderson Road at the moment that have very low P-tiles. We are actively discussing with TfL about potentially having an additional bus route on that road, but that would obviously require some consultation, and that could be funded from some of the money that's been gathered from this scheme and others as well. And there is ongoing discussions about Surrey Canal Road Station, but that's probably a little bit further.
Right. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak in objection to this? Not seeing anybody. Can we have the applicant page? Katie Greenwood? Not Katie Greenwood. If you could state your name and who you work for, then I'll give you 3 minutes. If you could each.
Hi everyone, my name is Russell Petrie. I'm the head of student accommodation for
Yep. My name is Alan Evans. I'm a director at Rock Planning on behalf of EQT.
I'm Alex White, architect, director at ACA Studios.
And I'm Gillian Allen from 360 Architecture, who was the architect for the self-storage element.
Okay.
Thank you, Chip. Just so before you start the stopwatch, can I clarify the point regarding the equalities impact assessment? So that there was one submitted, and forgive me, I didn't pick it up in the fact check from the committee report when it was drafted. There was one submitted with the planning application and uploaded onto the council's portal on the 18th of May 2023.
You have one. 18th
of May 2023. Yeah. So what was it listed as? It's the landly titled an inequalities impact assessment, drafted by Rock Planning. Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to planning officers for the presentation and for the committee members for your time this evening. I'd like you to look at this planning application in the context of the Old Kent Road master plan as a whole. The scheme, as highlighted on in paragraph 89 of the officer's report, it is providing and will provide a mixed and balanced community, and that's a very important aspect of consideration in your determination this evening. The site itself still is allocated as locally significant industrial land, so it's never been identified specifically historically as a site to deliver housing. So any accommodation on this site above and beyond an industrial or employment use is indeed a net, represents a net uplift. The applicant originating, or the applicant's DNA, their principal industry is in providing employment flow space, and we see this as an exemplar scheme which will deliver at least more than double the amount of specific employment flow space than any of the other schemes in the pipeline in this part of the Old Kent Road. In terms of planning policy, the provision of a payment in lieu of on-site affordable housing is enshrined within the subject plan under policy P1. And again, that's referenced in the officer's report. The scheme itself will provide 1,100 square metres of affordable workspace. Again, so a significant material benefit as part of the proposal. There are also very specific additional community benefits that again have been discussed, and we're happy to take any queries on that provision. The scheme itself would provide the equivalent of 237 housing units. We've drawn a housing scheme on this. The scheme before you tonight represents version 28, which shows the amount of time and effort that's gone into arriving at a satisfactory scheme. That delivers 189 residential units. So there is a net uplift of nearly 40 units that the payment in lieu would contribute towards. And I'd like to just also reserve the position in terms of the phasing. If I can have some time to make a few points about that as part of the discussion, that would be appreciated. And we have the applicant and the architect here to speak about any other specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for?
We're happy to give him the opportunity to complete his presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It was a very important point that we've heard the site falls within phase 2. There's commentary in terms of the benefits and when and how they will be delivered. We've also heard about some of the troubles of one or two other schemes. In my view, there is flexibility within the council's gift to move the scheme into a phase 1 scheme. Should a recommendation be forthcoming this evening, I'd like you to consider that. If not specifically the entire scheme, then certainly the ability to deliver clarity within that planning consent, deliver the non-residential elements as a phase 1 or as an early phase as part of the proposal, in order that it can start to yield those specific benefits. Thank you.
You've had some questions earlier on about kind of the possibility or not possibility of providing affordable now. And I appreciate that you've gone through 28 iteration of trying to get there itself. Sounds like the immediate one that preceded this was one which you had considered that and then moved away. Is it something that you could provide, but under a different kind of, I don't know, look of a building? Or is it just that it can't happen on that particular site?
The short answer is it can't happen, and it's principally down to the Building Safety Act and the changes that occurred through the lifetime of this application or the pre-application as it was then. I'm happy to pass over to the architect specifically, but again, the driver for the scheme is the large multipurpose employment unit, and that is part of the DNA of this proposal. So the housing element, which was subsequent, and I'm happy to concede that, admit that it was a subsequent element to the very first version of the scheme that we did have pre-application discussions with officers about. That housing element therefore wraps around that focus for the employment provision. I'm not an architect, but there's almost no other way that you can facilitate that level of employment floor space, as well as a suitably appropriate density housing scheme.
Just to follow up, so just to clarify, you're saying actually if you reduce a bit of the kind of floor space, affordable floor space, that you can provide some social housing. Is that what I'm getting?
I don't think that is it. Alex, do you want to?
I think there's a couple of points on the design of the building and how the employment element of it works with the rest of the scheme. So you've got the large employment area of the site, which is in the centre of the site, and the way the design has been generated is the student element wraps around that storage and employment and generating element, which kind of screens it from on Ilderton Road and provides a really nice active rather than a large industrial element that's directly on the road, which is something we're really cognizant about at the application stage. So one of the key drivers, and we were making it work, and it was right on the edge of working with the 189 unit scheme that was on the site. But what it was in particular was the split between the affordable housing and the private housing, how those different work. Because what you are having is quite a narrow element of housing against Ilderton Road, which meant that you had quite a lot of single aspect units that were just facing onto a road, so it was quite difficult to make it work. With the student cluster flats, they become bigger and they have more dual aspects, so that all the students have access to bigger spaces within the rooms. The students will have access to all the amenity spaces we've got. So, for example, if somebody wants to hang around in the Sky Garden, they can move out of their cluster flat and go into the Sky Garden, which is the 10th floor, halfway up the building, have a really good view. So people aren't restricted into the location where they're living so much as housing scheme. Also, with the way that the building safety regulation design worked, we were ending up with an extra stair core in the scheme as well, which meant that there was quite a long corridor that was running across the back of the employment use that gave a very long, inefficient way of getting to the site, and it also meant that you had a mixture of rented accommodation within all of the front block and in part of the taller element as well. So the entrances and the tenure split was becoming really, really difficult. And it was the plan to do that. And it was just about working in the viability from war and the build costs and everything just kept stacking up against it. And we have many bows to their arms, so they have a student housing vision. And we looked at a lot of different options, and that was the one that actually really worked. And it made a much more efficient plan because with student housing, you have one central element, which is the entrance that people come in through. And I can talk more about the amenity space a bit later. That made the way that people move around the building much more efficient, and it made it work better.
Thank you, and that was actually a really useful explanation about how that kind of decision has come about. I think building on some of the comments that I think Councillor Harper's made about the sheer amount of student accommodation and also co-living that is coming forward in the Old Kent Road area. I know that you've not got a sort of nominations agreement with any particular institution, it's going to be directly let. But in my mind, you know, the sort of two, maybe three kind of key universities that students that would be looking to live in this area would be Goldsmiths, South Bank and UAL. And myself included, I'm doing a master's at South Bank, and most students at those universities live at home. They don't live in student accommodation. And do you think that, you know, given the saturation of student accommodation in this ward, that this is a model that will actually sort of stack up in the long run?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's worth kind of pointing out that we have another site, the 2272 St. James Road is a site that we own. We have first-hand knowledge of renting to students. That's 100% direct let building as well. And we've owned it for 3 letting cycles, 3 academic year cycles. and every year it's been sold out. The other site on Ilton Road, we heard that they opened in January, sold out immediately. They've also sold out quite quickly into this academic year. So I think the velocity of the sales that are coming through for the couple schemes that have been delivered so far kind of speak to the demand in the area. And I think what we're seeing and why we think student is very viable here is that kind of transport route up the Old Kent Road to the Elfin and Castle node specifically is really attractive. And if you compare to some of the stuff that's been proposed in the Elfin and Castle immediate area, this is significantly cheaper in terms of kind of the affordability levels that are viable in this kind of scheme. To the tune of kind of 30% cheaper than what you can get in a prime zone 1 equivalent. So I think there's an article in the press today about how maintenance loans are below London rents now. So we as a business quite like attracting a wide segment of the demand pool, which our other site on St. James Road does. Significantly cheaper than things you see 10 minutes down the road. And this is exactly in the same kind of.
Professor Harper.
Thank you all for coming and your presentation. Kind of two questions which may be directed at different. So firstly, I mentioned it earlier, but in the report there is discussion about a strategy for integrating students with the people using affordable workspace. I haven't seen that strategy. It'd be interesting if someone could talk about what that strategy looks like. And then the other thing I wanted to ask was, came out of Councillor Livingston's kind of objection. One of the things he mentioned was community space and kind of community asset, and he raised the point about like whether or not the space suggested in the scheme was appropriate for the area. The officer response noted the community review panel appendix in the reports pack. I just wanted some clarification on like how we got to the decision that an exhibition space and a cafe and cycle workshop were appropriate. I know in the appendix 6 report contribution to local economy, it says we would like to see further consideration of the introduction of publicly accessible areas on the ground and first floor, such as a cafe, exhibition spaces, and other public uses. Was that kind of all which led to there being an exhibition space, or was there more kind of community engagement to get to that decision? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. So I'll start off, but if anyone else wants to jump in, they can. In short, I think you've answered your own question. So the provision of those community spaces is almost a direct result of that detailed conversations we had with the community review panel. Those were the elements of a development scheme that were deemed to be priority and relevant to the panel, who obviously reflect local demographic, very specific local demographic that have a vested interest in the area. So it was born out of that consultation process.
Sorry, so there's more conversation than literally that paragraph being kind of directly in.
Just a couple more points. The cafe is completely standalone, so it's not directly connected to the student population at all. In the same way that other members of the public could use it, but it's a directly self-contained unit. I think probably also part of the exhibition space within the workspace has been driven by some of the parties and the charities we do in terms of they would think be really good in this area. Now, I know certainly one of the people we spoke to lots of Southwark Studios, but we spoke to another company, College, I can't remember, ACT, and they did a lot of arts-based charity work. There's a lot of artists in the area, particularly on the Hatcham Road area. There's lots of spaces. They thought there's crying out for a sort of an exhibition space for local artists as well. So they thought that would be a really useful well. So one of the key things from the community panel was generating concerns about student housing generally, is that people are there, they stay within their own
environment, they don't interact with the community. Mindful of that, and we really get people to interact with local people, even though they're there for 9 months. Obviously, students would probably rather stay for the full 3 years, but there's such a shortage of housing that people can't do that. But in that short time that they're there, we want to try and get as maximum amount of interaction with the local people as possible, so they're not a fly-by-night kind of people, and they can possibly even rent within the local area and stay within the community going forward in the future if they like living in the area.
Sorry, just a question about the strategy for integrating students with the workspace. Was there anything more specific?
Yeah, I think if you look at our other building in Southwark, it's about a third University of the Arts students as well, and obviously they have a big campus set up. But we suspect a decent amount of staying here will be kind of art focused as well. So obviously some gallery space would make sense there. And just to echo what everyone else has said, is that trying to be very sympathetic to some of the community member review and some of the feedback that we got. Since we integrated these spaces, we would have preferred to not have them, frankly. But we were trying to be sympathetic to some of the views and be able to have students managing some of these spaces themselves, taking over some of the gallery space. We've done that in the past. We're getting pretty sophisticated. Some of these student buildings where you have podcast rooms, and we've had fashion students. We've done like fashion shows and things on site. So it's those kind of activities. We kind of see that space almost as a little bit of an extension. It'll be run completely separately, but when you've got 600 students living above you, activating that space should be right.
If I could just add very briefly to that point. So the student accommodation is managed by one entity. The affordable workspace will be managed by one entity, and as we discussed, potentially Southwark Studios and or another. That allows two entities, two single people, to have a direct conversation. Whereas if the building was multi-tenanted, you wouldn't have that link up between the two proposed uses.
Councillor Hartley.
Chair. You'd have heard me questioning Pan earlier about plans for the cycle workshop. Can you provide any more detail, because there's a whole range contained within this short paragraph here of a space where people occasionally repair bikes and where a couple of times a week a mechanic is available, or what is effectively a subsidised bike repair shop which is open most of the time through the week. What are you considering at the moment? There's not a lot of detail.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The consideration is the latter of the sort of two options you've just read out. It would be a open and managed workspace. So there is an outfit called On Your Bike UK, On Your Bike London. They've got a accommodation in London Bridge. They have a fixed unit with a cycle repair. It would either be a very similar operation to that, or indeed a sort of franchise from that. The idea is to get the space occupied with an active and used as a benefit to the community. The genesis of the idea behind the cycle repair workshop again came through feedback from the community review panel. It's recognised as something that people potentially need, particularly dealing with some of the speed bumps on Ilderton Road and cycles getting, if you're cycling too fast, there is a genuine understanding and desire for that type of facility. We'd like to do what we can to try and deliver that.
So you'd have no problem with the Section 106 agreement being quite specific about the level of provision?
In principle, no, not at all. And I think we do refer to it in principle in the heads of terms, and we're happy to finalise that detail.
Can I very quickly follow up on Councillor Chester's earlier question? Was she right in her guess for the kinds of institutions that are providing the vast majority of your students at your current site and that you're expecting?
So at our current site, it's about 1/3 King's, 1/3 Arts, and then 1/3 of the 30 other institutions. So it really does tend to be a mix. I think this one a bit further down will kind of capture some of those like Goldsmiths and South Bank a bit more. But yeah, it tends to be a real. Those would be the kind of main nodes, like I said, kind of coming down from Illerton to Old Kent up to the Eltham Castle.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming. Please stay in the front row.
Thank you, Chair.
So, is there any portions of the scheme live within 100 metres from the Machine Creek? We come to Councillor Livingston. State your name.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my fellow ward colleague, Councillor Evelyn Akoto, who can't be here this evening. I'm opposing this application due to its non-compliance with policies P1 on affordable housing, P17 in terms of tall buildings on the Southwark Plan, together with affordable housing, SPD policy 3, and AAP4 of the draft Old Kent Road Area Action Plan to do student numbers. As committee knows, I don't think anybody could describe me as a NIMBY when it comes to development in the borough as a whole or in Old Kent Road, but I do have very severe concerns about the lack of provision of affordable housing on site with this development. We heard from the applicant that they suggested that in lieu payments were enshrined in policy. That's not my reading of it. I did double check what it says in the Affordable Housing Supplementary Planning document, which sets out there's a very clear hierarchy in considering when that might be appropriate or where actually there needs to be affordable housing delivered on site or off site. And at the end, very bottom of that hierarchy, section 3.3 states, in exceptional circumstances, developments creating 10 homes or more may provide a financial contribution in lieu of delivering affordable housing. This will only be accepted where the payment in lieu can be robustly justified over on-site or off-site provision. This approach must also contribute to the objectives of creating mixed and balanced communities. This is in accordance with NPF paragraph 64. Now, I would contend that there aren't any exceptional circumstances in play here. We've heard a discussion about a very similar sized site, which is immediately adjacent to this, which has a very large warehouse, multi-storey warehouse space where articulated lorries can drive in and out, that has a 28-storey tower and yet has compliant levels of affordable housing. Further down Illerton Road, we also have a scheme which successfully mixes industrial, student accommodation and affordable housing, which is largely delivered. We've also got the Devonshire Place scheme, which has compliant levels of student accommodation, social housing, and a very clear plan about how those two should. So I don't think that that holds. Just to turn very quickly to exemplary architectural design and residential quality. Again, I looked up in the dictionary what exemplary means. It means deserving imitation because of excellence. I do not believe that I don't believe that any member of this committee would like to see this scheme delivered anywhere else in the borough, certainly not in their own wards. And so for me, that must fail the exemplary test, given it isn't providing that. Thank you, Chair. Happy to answer questions on my other points.
Councillor Livingstone, have you got anything else to tell us about exemplary buildings?
I didn't about that, but I just want to touch on the student accommodation with the indulgence of the committee. So AAP 4, policy 2.4 of AAP 4, which we all agreed as a council assembly only last month, states that student housing development in the Old Kent Road must both meet the requirements of the Southwark Plan and demonstrate it delivers other plan priorities, including affordable housing. So again, that's something that we've recently agreed. I think the fact that, as we've seen, I understand the point was made about 10,000 student homes needing to be delivered, but this would mean that over a third of that figure is being delivered in a single ward. me, that feels like a massive overconcentration in a single area. And I do think that that unbalances the community, not because I have any problem with students per se, but I do think we have so many people that are by nature transient. They are likely to be there for only a year in terms of their lessons student accommodation. It means they're not putting down roots in the community. And for me, that does mean that that quantum of student accommodation in one single wall feels excessive. And I think, given that there don't appear to be any clear community benefits out of this scheme, or what ones are given seem very marginal, given there isn't that affordable housing being delivered, that does concern me greatly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Livingston, for your presentation. We've heard from the applicant, or read from officers in relation to the community benefits, which they say, both in terms of global workspace and communal space itself, and you do not believe it's tangible. Can you explain a bit?
Well, I think the difficulty is what the community groups that are going to use it. I understand the point about exhibition space. There are artists locally that might be able to use that, but we're only talking about 200 hours in a year, which, if you think about it, is that's what, 16 days. Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. But it's 16 days a year we're talking about, which feels quite slender. That's not to say it's no benefits at all, but it isn't a lot in comparison, I think, to disadvantages. This is, this would be the tallest building on this stretch of Ilderton Road, not necessarily the AAP as a whole, but in this section of it. It's even taller than the very tall building you can see going up already at the Bermondsey Heights scheme. And so I do think for a building that has that prominence on the skyline of Suffolk, it needs to be offering more back to the community.
Another question. What are your views about the 20 million? Do you think it's enough in relation to setting the fact that there isn't?
Well, I do, first of all, agree with the Grampian condition about this should be a phase 2 proposal, in that I think it's important in terms of housing that we are prioritising that housing that does meet our affordable housing, and this one clearly doesn't. But of course, that does then create the situation that the majority of this money won't be usable for affordable housing for a decade from now. If you think about the timescale it's going to take to agree the Bakerloo line extension, and then for this to be built out, that means that most of that money won't be providing any affordable housing for a decade. And whilst I accept the sort of concerns there are about not having that money in the council's own scheme, we're not going to see that money for a very long time. And so, the housing market is clearly going to change in that time. What we need now in terms of student accommodation, because of what the market says now, will be very different in 10 years' time. We can be certain of that, and certain also, given where government is trying to push housing, but actually we would hope that housing becomes a lot more viable over that decade, and therefore, agreeing something now when we could have something that's better in the future before all of this could be built, that to me feels as if it's a poor choice.
I have a slightly cheeky question for you, but I mean, not certainly saying that we would be minded to refuse this application, but if we were minded to refuse the application and you wanted to sort of send a clear message as to what sort of scheme you think is acceptable, would you prefer a conventional housing scheme on this, or would you prefer a sort of student with on-site affordable accommodation?
If I was sitting in Cass' place, I'd say the application is the application is the application. I mean, for me, the important thing is about delivering the affordable housing. And actually, having had a look at the designs that are shown to us again, I appreciate the point about single aspect homes, but we have more than one core here. It doesn't feel as if it's that difficult to be able to adjust the scheme to come up with something which has a social housing element, because you can quite easily keep that separate from student housing. That's not too different from some of those schemes that we've got elsewhere in the Old Kent Road. So I think it could be delivered on site without a huge change to these plans. As I said, I don't have a problem with student accommodation per se, but what I do want to see is that coming with some benefit to the local community rather than it just being seen as a good thing in its own right? And I think we have been, as councillors, both as a council as a whole, but as local councillors, been for that journey of the local community where we've had to persuade them that actually having an area action plan is something that's good for them, because it does do things like, first and foremost, deliver the levels of affordable housing that they aspire to, because of the severe housing shortages that we do have in the ward. And it does feel a little bit like we're breaking the confidence of the local community if we to agree with this, contrary to what we've said in the AAP and our policy as a whole across.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Chair, just in terms of a comment and speak from Councillor Livingston. So you heard from Colin quite eloquently the different timescales in terms of, you made reference and you alluded to, you know, the Bermondsey Heights scheme, and that they've been able to, you know, achieve affordable housing, and it's only X amount of proposal. There is a distinctive time scale in which that development and Colin sort of, you know, outlined in detail the different phases by which they were able to seemingly. Are you able to comment? And hence the reason why he set that out to justify why the applicants actually delivered it. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think we're looking at a scheme which is going to be delivering that student accommodation in a decade if it's agreed as it is on paper. And I think market conditions will change almost certainly significantly in that time. And what might not look on paper of being affordable at this moment, could well be affordable by the time that work starts building this. So I think that is something that needs to be considered as part of that. And whilst I accept, there may be differences with Bermondsey Heights next door in terms of some of that stuff, it does show that where there's a will, there's a way to deliver and be policy compliant. And it's not the only site, and there have been other sites that have been approved since those changes in market conditions. I mentioned Devonshire Place as a scheme that is a tall town. I think probably is an exemplary scheme. We do have other schemes that have managed to achieve that. So I have, Colin and I have many very fruitful and positive discussions. I would have to take a slightly different view to him on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Livingston. May now leave the room, please. Anybody have any further questions or clarification?
Just to do you accept what Councillor Livingston's saying, that actually market condition changes pretty quickly, and what we have as at present viable, and given that it can't start till 5 years time anyway, that market condition could change to make affordable homes affordable or viable. And secondly, in relation to the 20 million, are you able to just clarify whether, because I think I read it somewhere, but I've been trying to look for the paragraph, that isn't indexed immediately, it's only indexed later after a few years or so. Can you confirm that? And if that's the case, why can't it be indexed immediately?
I mean, in terms of the first point about do markets change in development, yes, they do. Everybody in this room, other than planning, will, if that's the case. Markets come and go, it varies time. The point about phasing, what we do is we review phasing, and Alan, on behalf of the developer, talked about that. So we do review when schemes drop in determining which goes into phase one. We do prioritise affordable housing delivery and like affordable housing delivery. We have got some sites which will drop out of phase one, as I say, probably in day students. But in reviewing that, we'll be reviewing the scheme and other schemes. Yeah, I mean, the Councillor Livingston, yeah, makes a perfectly logical, valid point about things changing. But equally, I'm sure Councillor Whittam as chair and Councillor Livingston to committee that we're determining the application under its own merits at this time. So the decision-making process is not about second guessing what will happen in the future, because none of us know what's going to happen to us, and you know that the process of you taking a decision is this case on its merits, not like or might not that in its time. Because that's an unknown. Will it be different? Yes, that's the only thing I can say with any certainty.
The application is the application.
Yes, so just the second question on the indexing.
Yes, so sorry, usually the indexing would start with the grant of the consent, which is the signing of the 106 and the issuing of the decision. So basically what it's doing is saying, well, at this point in time, this is the value. But once you achieve your planning permission, then the information would carry on from that point on decision. So in terms of when that would be, I mean, if you were to approve this, we would probably resolve 106 probably in the next couple of months, like that. So then it would index from there with inflation.
Comments? Okay.
And I can start. And then, I think there's some good parts about this application. I think it seeks to kind of buy into kind of the policy of the AAP in terms of having a mixed use by providing kind of a workspace at the bottom and providing some hotel that you can give it. But I'm not sure that it prioritizes things the right way in the AAP and the sort of plan of the London wants in terms of priority being given to affordable loans and through our questioning, through what we're presented. I'm not so sure we've had anything that makes it an exceptional reason why we should supplement affordable housing aspect itself. I am concerned if we do accept this, we will set up a position whereby actually comes a norm that implementing use contrary to the intentions of the policy itself, it amounts to exceptional reasons itself. I do also think that actually with kind of an opportunity to explore different options, that there may well be an opportunity whereby a different scheme with perhaps a different proportion of affordable workspace, a different proportion of community space could allow an affordable housing on site. So those are my sort of concern at the moment. I am edging towards in this station, primarily significantly for the fact that I didn't know.
You know.
I would echo Councillor Shittu's comments. I do have concerns about not having the affordable element and that, you know, what message that would send, not only and to the community, but future applications come. I am never keen to make a decision that potentially puts us in a position of setting a precedent. And I know as each application we merits. I disagree with Councillor Tester in terms of, most students sort of live at home. They are prepared to sort of travel. Certainly in that south of the borough, it would be very, very difficult. And I understand a concentration in that Old Kent Road corridor. And you've got the Elephant Castle, which is, in the close to Zone 1, and you've got King's College and UCL, where I studied, and you've got Camberwell, etc. So students are prepared to travel. I crossed the river when I was studying up. So that's not an issue as long as there's good transportation links. But I do worry that we are in the business of creating mixed communities, and I worry that we don't have the. And I agree with Councillor. Perhaps with a different computation, it's something that would be achievable. So I am on the thinking application. Although a welcome student accommodate, obviously, and I understand the need, and the targets that they need to go some way, but for two reasons: not only messages to community, but also future applications.
I think it's a very difficult one balance for me. Like Councillor Soames, I went to LSE and I lived south of the river, and I did commute as a student over the river, and I do appreciate that students do live a fair distance from where they study. However, I do think that for me personally, where this development is proposed, the location of it, where it is on the Ilderton Road, I really don't think it meets the kind of London plan criteria of being located with good public transport accessibility. I appreciate that our officers have told us there are potentially plans afoot for extra bus links to the Old Kent Road, but it is really in a bit of a black spot, even if you have improvements to South Bermondsey Station. South Bermondsey Station only takes you to London Bridge. You then have to change again. If you have the Surrey Canal Road station, well, that's on the overground, that's great, but also that will still involve you changing and moving and getting to a lot of these universities. It's not a direct route, and I do think, for me personally, I can't really see the particular viability of this. However, I know that is not a material planning consideration. I think my main concerns of this are the quality of the development. I think I agree with Councillor Livingston's contributions that actually this is not really an exemplary design. I would agree with him that I wouldn't want this in my ward. And again, no one could, I would never call myself an NIMBY. I'd never see myself as being that. But I do think we want to be making sure that we do have the best quality design, particularly when we're looking at buildings that are this tall. For me, it's not in a location that seems to sit right for a building that is the tallest along the Ilderton Road. It's not of kind of landmark significance in terms of its design. I really don't think it meets our own policies. And whilst I know that, we are just considering this application, we're not considering the broader precedents that are being set. However, we do see applications referencing previous approvals as a precedent being set. And I am particularly concerned that if we approve this, that doesn't meet our kind of standards of exemplary design, doesn't meet our own policy about having affordable accommodation on site, I do worry that this precedent will be set and that we will have applications coming to these committees saying, well, you did this on this scheme and therefore we think it's appropriate for this one. So I think if we are minded to refuse this, it would send a very clear expectation for those looking at bringing forward schemes similar, that we do want to see affordable housing provided on site, and that is of massive importance to us as a council. So I think I'd be minded to agree with some of my fellow councillors' contributions that I would also be minded to refuse this, but I would be interested in getting officers' perspective about the risks of appeal and obviously the costs that would be associated with that.
Thank you. Yes, I'm afraid that for me, I will not be voting in favour of. And for me, it's not that complicated. I understand kind of points about viability and the applicant's points about viability, but for me, that's not irrelevant, but we have quite clear kind of requirements, which I do not believe this meets, either in the Southwark plan or the kind of area action plan for the Old Kent Road. And I don't think there's been exceptional circumstances demonstrated to a degree that can get past that. So yeah, for me, that kind of thing. I was actually, when I was reading through it, surprised that it had even come to me at this point. And there was one other thing I was going to say, but I've forgotten what it was. And yeah, I guess I understand that it's very difficult creating viable schemes for the architects and developers, but as a planning committee, we have to kind of look at the real considerations and our policies, and I don't think. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I'm very much on the fence on this one. Reading the papers beforehand, I mean, my priority, and I'm sure the starting point for the vast majority of the members of the committee, is always affordable housing and how we get more of it in the borough, in particular in this area, because as well as taking more than its fair share of student housing, it's a part of the borough that in being up for more redevelopment has the opportunity to deliver more affordable housing. In my ward, where there's very little opportunity for that kind of change, I think in the last decade we've achieved 7 affordable houses, and it might well be a record decade going forward because there's little opportunity to change the combination that's there. The Old Kent Road and the nature of it provides us with more opportunity to deliver. So the idea of getting more through the development, and the 35% I think probably represents a bigger contribution than we would get if we ended up with on-site housing in a different scheme. I see the attraction of that. However, I have also heard the discussion of other committee members and the objector that if we're not having on or off-site proposals, and if we're not seeing what could be provided by a scheme, and instead we're seeing an in lieu payment, we expect an exemplary scheme in that case, and it's hard, I think, to make that case. So I understand the points that
everybody on the panel. I looked at this scheme and I just saw a hodgepodge of different uses thrown together with no coherent plan. And I'm very keen that these student accommodations have amenities on each level, so that people, are not wandering aimlessly through the building looking for the kitchen and cinema. But the amenities are close by to each set of students in each cluster. So the reason for having a cycle facility then seems bizarre. And why not just call it another retail space with some sort of tender process to get the best fits for the building? I decide now that it's a recycle. It makes sense to me. But I'm not keen to either. So I think going to okay. So I'm going to propose a motion to refuse this application. We will work out the reasons for that once we have the result of that vote. So I need a second of it. Councillor Fitzgerald, seconding. So we will go to the vote on recommendation for refusal. So Councillor Harper,
I vote in favour of.
Councillor Hartley,
I'm on the fence, Chair, so I won't vote on that basis.
so you're abstaining. Councillor Sloan,
I vote to refuse.
Councillor Fitzgerald,
I vote to refuse.
Councillor Tester.
I vote in favour of refusing as well.
So that is carried. Oh, I vote for refusal. So that vote is carried. So if we could clear the audience, we will discuss the reason, then we'll bring you back. We're going into closed session. So we'll come and get you from the speakers area. Thank you for your patience. We have a reason for refusal. Proposed development would not deliver any conventional affordable housing on site and would fail to contribute to a mixed and inclusive neighbourhood, contrary to Southwark Plan policies P1 and P5(2), London Plan Policy H15(a), and Draft Regulation 19 for Kent Road Area Action Plan Policy 4. The guidance contained in the adopted affordable housing supplementary planning document 2008 and the draft housing supplementary planning document 2011 and 2024. So we're voting for refusal of the application on those grounds. So, Councillor Harper.
Voting to refuse on those grounds.
Councillor Hartley.
I agree. Vote to refusal.
Councillor Soames.
I too vote to refuse on those grounds.
Councillor City.
I too vote to refuse on those grounds.
Councillor Tester.
Yeah, voting for refusal on those grounds.
I'm Councillor Kath Whittam and I vote for refusal on these grounds. So the vote is carried and the application is refused. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry,